Hello and welcome to the SuperShow podcast. Today I am your host, Alex Jones, and I am joined by the absolutely amazing, the awesome Jamie, who is the only member of the SuperShow who's managed to make it to every podcast this year so far. Jamie, I would give you a pat on the back if you were in reaching distance. I can do one of these.
I can kind of give myself one, but I am so fat nowadays that even that, it's a bit of a stretch. But thank you very much. That's very gracious of you. Yes, 100% attendance record, and I'm proud to boast it.
If you are listening to this on a podcasting platform and you can't see us as the people who are watching on YouTube can, you would know that Chris is unfortunately not available today. I wasn't here last week because I was in lovely sunny Kazakhstan. It is very nice this time of year. I wasn't in Kazakhstan. Unfortunately, I'm sure it is lovely. I had my house was riddled with COVID, so that's why I wasn't around for the podcast. But let's move away from those those sour messages and move towards some good ones, because we are the Super Show. We're a gaming podcast. We're on YouTube. We're on Twitter. You can reach out to us at Super Show Pod. We are available on all the big podcasting platforms. I'm talking Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, and we are on Paisley Radio every week, twice a week, in fact. Thursdays at 10 p.m. and repeated again on Mondays at 10 p.m. and that is at paisleyradio.com. This week is going to be something a little bit different, a little bit special, because the world is not the same as it was last week. Things have changed. The gaming landscape has been renewed because someone, Microsoft, just dropped $70 billion to buy out Activision Blizzard, which I'm sure no one saw coming, except for the Super Show podcast. Can I just put that out there right now? Because I believe that Chris mentioned last week, in fact, that he could see this happening, which is pretty amazing, Jamie. All the news this week is about Microsoft and Activision Blizzard.
It was pretty spooky, yeah. Chris and I were sat there last week. We were talking about 2022 and all the crazy things that could happen. I think we were talking about Game Pass and PlayStation Spartacus and all that kind of stuff, and speculating about I think we actually referred to them as crazy things that Microsoft could theoretically do. And it just so happened that Chris accurately guessed one of those crazy things by predicting the acquisition of Activision Blizzard. And it's funny, like, I remember when we were planning for last week's episode, and even when you and I were planning for the week before that, there was what felt like a real shortage of news out there. Like, we were struggling a little bit to fill out the document that we worked from. We were thinking, what can we talk about here? We're going to have to talk about our Christmases and our New Year's and all the games we played. And now we've just had a bomb dropped on us, where probably this might remain the biggest news story of the entire year, regardless of what happens. And we're not even out of
January.
Exactly. Yet. And, like, I don't know. I was shivering. I was sweating. I had every single emotion you could possibly imagine when I first read this news. And when I began to believe that this was actually real and not some horrible prank from a Twitter account that had tricked us all.
Do you know what? I knew something exciting had happened because my WhatsApp group went absolutely mental and I hadn't seen the news. And suddenly I had this like message. And it was all you guys sort of saying like, oh my goodness, I can't believe they've gone and bought Activision Blizzard. So yeah, like you said, we've gone from often a very lackluster time in gaming news at the beginning of the year before you start to get some of the big titles start to drop, as we will see in February. And we've had a giant story dropped right in our lap. So we thought we would take the time today to just talk about Microsoft, talk about the Jesus Christ, I can't say it. Activision Blizzard purchase that we'll be going through. And that's about it. So
yeah. That's all you need on a week like this.
That is all you need. But before we get to that, we need to do a little bit of housekeeping. We need to do a comment of the week, Jamie. So I've got a comment for you right here, and this comes in from Neddy, who says, currently listening to y'all talk about how you want Microsoft to buy Blizzard on the day Microsoft announced it was buying Activision Blizzard King for damn near $70 billion. Jason Schreier has nothing on the Super Show's scoops. Lol.
Yeah.
So look, you can't even escape the news story in the comments because, as I said, Chris was ahead of the curve in guessing that news was going to drop.
Do you know what? If you're going back to our previous episodes and cutting out shorts for them to upload on the YouTube channel, we should absolutely cut that out as a short and make it as clear as possible by like putting the date that we predicted that like almost a week before it happened.
Do you know what? That's a good idea. I'm going to do that because, yeah, for people that didn't see and that don't care and like to ignore shorts, I had to make a short of the podcast last week because you had an absolutely stellar take when you were talking about Metroid Dread, which was to say that it's basically Flappy Bird. Which
does that mean we agree?
Do you know what? Yeah, weirdly, yes. And it's not the only boss that has the Flappy Bird set, because I know which boss you're talking about. You're talking about the big like Mutant X thing that fires the little things across, and you've got to like jump and dodge and jump and duck and do whatever. But there are actually other bosses who you can kind of use that Flappy Bird jumping style to get around. I'm thinking like the last boss is one of them.
Okay.
He flies up in the air and he's trying to shoot you, and you can sort of hover around him, and if you stay nice and close to him and you jump like in the Flappy Bird way, you can kind of fly around him. Okay. And when you said it made me think of a couple of the other sections of that game which can be Flappy Bird-esque.
Yep, turns out that's Metroid Dread's biggest influence. You heard it here first.
And I believe your ending quote was, you are going to finish Metroid Dread because you want to be absolutely qualified to shit on that game for years to come.
I haven't actually done it yet, but I'm getting there. The last time I tried to play it, I thought I was really close. I still think I'm damn close. And it just did a couple of things that, hey, go figure, pissed me off. And so I put it down.
Do you know, okay, we'll get to it after we've done the shout out for the Patreons, but I have played something else which is kind of in a similar vein to Metroid Dread, and some of the same problems I had with Metroid Dread I felt with this as well. So
maybe they're genre issues or something. I don't know. We'll find out.
Yeah, that's, to be fair, that's probably what it is. But as I said, it is time to give a little shout out to some of the amazing patrons that support us over at, or I just get this wrong, patrons who support us at patreon.com. I always call them Patreons, but apparently they're patrons, which kind of makes more sense. They support us at patreon.com/SuperShow, and you can do it as well if you would like to support us for as little as $2. You can join our Discord. You can talk to us whenever you want. You can at us in the Discord, and especially I'm so sad that I'll probably respond to you because it pings up on my phone and gives me a little thing. Otherwise, I just forget to even comment for like weeks at a time, and then I'll have a little rally and a rant and go off on one about something really random.
Yeah.
But you can talk to us, and you can get some of the some behind the scenes videos that we've got up on our Patreon, and also a couple of spoiler casts. And the first episode of the greatest show ever to be made but not to be watched is, of course, No Murderer, of which there will be another one coming at some point this year, hopefully sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
That having been said, there are some names on the screen right now of some of the awesome Patreons, and I would like to give a shout out to a few. They are Aaron Cameron, Athletic Gravy, Dark Silhouette, Helium Joker, Jesper Camdo Nielsen, Javella Cujo, Leo Murger, Mindful Pig, Mr. Anthropic, Nathan Pears, Pastors Guild, Scary Omen, Starfall Kid, That Bitch Clara, Brett Z, Doppler, Geometric Potter, Hacksaw Book Read, Manuel Guerrero, Peaswad, and okay, you Greek midget, your turn to try and pronounce Magnar Mikkelsen. That's my guess.
That your official attempt? You're entering that as your one and only try?
My one and only try.
Okay.
Can I give another shout out to That Bitch Clara, because I love that video so much. It's
I'm glad someone is reminding us that video exists. And I'll also extend my condolences to the artist formerly known as The Uncaged, who, as you can tell there from the Greek midget reference, designed that patron name to be read out by none other than Chris. He reached out to me ahead of time because Chris was originally going to be hosting this podcast. And unfortunately, when we switched over to you at the last minute, Jonesy, I did try to reach out for him for a replacement name. We didn't manage to get one across the line in time, and I thought it would be a bit cheeky of me to make up my own insult for you. So we're just going to have to see what he cooks up next. Maybe for me, maybe a different one for Chris. I don't know. We'll find out in the coming weeks.
I'm hoping at one point we just get his name right. Because it's, do you know what? I did research. I actually did research for that attempt, which is sad, isn't it? I found a few websites and it was like, this is how you say it. But I don't think I'm doing it right still. So,
but, yeah. You know what? You're growing. It's self-improvement, and self-improvement at the hands of our patrons. And if Patreon is not there for that, then what is it there for?
This is very true, and that's something else you can do if you join our Patreon. You can help us pronounce names that we can't pronounce from other countries, because it's surprisingly difficult when someone says, "This is my name," because then they'll say, "This is how to pronounce it." But of course, in text, if you don't know their accent, you don't know how to pronounce the word that they're saying. It sounds like this.
Right.
People
Yeah.
often say, "Oh, my name is, I don't know, like Bill Maher, like Mar is in car." But obviously, if you were from Boston, you'd go car. So then you'd go, "So your name's Bill Maher."
And also, like Bill Maher, assuming you're talking about the TV Bill Maher, that spelling is weird, right? And you'd look at that spelling and be like, Bill Maher.
You exactly. But then, but people say the word car differently. You can't even say it sounds like when you say car. Because an American might say car, like a Bostonian.
As the idiot who decided to start last week's episode of the podcast with a rundown of the best paid CEOs in gaming, trust me, I know all too well about hard to pronounce names in the video game sphere.
Well, I've had a complete nightmare the last couple of weeks, of course, because damn my cockburn or something.
Yeah.
Damn I hate cockburn.
Damn I hate cockburn.
Yeah, I mean, that was a shit show of a pronunciation, obviously, from me, but I thought, you know what, I can't pronounce things. And that's just, I'm going to have to go on some, I don't know what you even call it, vocabulary expansion to try and learn how to pronounce some more stuff.
That might help.
But that having been said, Jamie, I want to hear what you've been playing for the last week.
Okay, well, I guess good news is that I haven't been playing much, but I have had time to squeeze something in today, and that's Rainbow Six Extraction, because it launched the 20th as of the time of recording. And thanks to a handy little service called Game Pass, I've got a feeling that might not be the last time we say those two words in the next 2 hours. I have been able to play it at no additional cost over my base subscription to that service, because Ubisoft teamed up with Microsoft to get that deal done. It is a bit of a weird one. You need to have an existing Uplay account. You need to then connect your Uplay account and your Xbox account, and actually that enables you to download the game on Ubisoft's native PC app. So it doesn't, you don't launch the game via the Xbox app anymore. Bit of a faff. And I was really curious to see what that game was all about, because obviously the review embargo dropped a couple of days ago, and some of the reviews, I don't know if you read any, they were pretty damning. It seemed like a lot of the major, outlets and websites were kind of, they just gave it middling reviews. There were lots of kind of 7 out of 10s out there. And some of so let's say maybe more online focused individuals or content creators were a little bit more damning. I know in particular, I almost called him Skillshare, Skill Up. He was not very fond of this game, and he kind of takes the argument or the perspective, and he makes this very clear very early on in his review that a bland game is actually worse than a bad game. Like a bad game might be interesting in the way it is bad, whereas a bland game is just bland. And he basically went on a big long rant about how this doesn't really do anything that Siege doesn't do as well, if not better, and that the way it's constructed, the way it's structured is in itself very repetitive and very boring, and that the systems, the upgrade systems, the progression systems aren't that engaging, and that the moment-to-moment gameplay isn't that fun. So I went into this kind of thinking, oh god, this could be a disaster. After an hour with it, I'm like, do you know what? I'd probably come more on those, hey, this is an average game side of the argument. Right. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with it, which, to be fair, Skill Up does make clear as well that there's nothing demonstrably wrong with it. It just seems like it might be a little bit bare bones. It looks like a boilerplate, you're going to play this a couple of times with your friends because it's on Game Pass title. And I think that's what it's going to be for me. There's nothing about it, based on first blush, that is going to get its hooks into me. And I think, some of the elements that they've clearly tried to experiment with, it's got this risk-reward system where you can exfil at certain points of the level, or you can keep progressing for better rewards, but the enemies become greater in volume and in strength. I will say that my first couple of runs, I didn't really experience that at all, and we made through all 3 stages without any real difficulty whatsoever. Also, I remember when we were first looking at the gameplay reveals and some of those gameplay trailers, and we said it almost had like a GTFO style element, and that it could maybe differentiate itself from that Left 4 Dead style of co-op shooter with more stealth mechanics, or maybe having to hold down certain areas, or a heightened level of difficulty, and just none of that stuff really manifests itself in a particularly interesting way. And it felt like whether we were going stealthy or we were just shooting these infected beings, one, it wasn't that satisfying, and two, it was never that hard. So, you don't really have much choice. There's not really much benefit to one play style over another.
Which is pretty damning when you're talking about PvE as a game.
Yeah. And I don't know, unless someone gets really into those operators and really into some of the things they unlock later on, because you earn XP towards the progression of individual operators and they have gadgets and weapons and skins that you unlock later down the line, I don't think there's going to be much to this in the long run, which is weird considering how long it's been in development for. But then again, not that weird when you consider that they cut the price a little bit and put it on Game Pass day one, so.
Yeah, you have to wonder if although it's good when things come to Game Pass and things like that day one, you have to wonder if that's because behind the scenes they've looked at the reality of the situation and they've kind of said, okay, we don't think it's necessarily going to be a full price title upon release.
Yeah.
Maybe it would do us better if we do a deal with Xbox and we can get it on there early.
I part of me still feels like Ubisoft are just trying to clean their slate after what seemed like a very, at times confusing, at times maybe even troubling sort of coronavirus period for them. Because I remember, their slate around 2019, let's say E3 2019.
I'd go back further though, dude. Like I'd go back to this thinking about like Watch Dogs Legion. Even that was like a weird release where they just kind of snuck it out.
That's what I mean. That's all a part of like, I think 2020 and 2020, in so much as that like, hey, I don't think it's that controversial to say that the plan probably wasn't to release Immortals Phoenix Rising, Watch Dogs Legion, and Assassin's Creed Valhalla, 3 third-person open-world action-adventure games within like 2 months of each other, and that's what they did.
Weirdest thing, it was so strange that they just pumped them out.
Hyperscape seemed weird. The Division Heartlands had gameplay leaks, but then disappeared. That Ghost Recon free-to-play thing had a planned closed beta or private test or whatever it was, and then also disappeared. Skull and Bones like got completely restarted and I think now still exists. Beyond Good and Evil 2, no one fucking knows. There are games like Roller Champions that I does that still exist? I don't know.
That's a really good question.
Yeah, like, so it's a very strange time, and this Extraction was one of those games that was rattling around in amongst that list. It was on that slate for a good handful of years, and there's a part of me that just feels like Ubisoft just said to themselves, like, we've done everything we can. There's not that much more we can do with this formula or with the game we built. Let's just kind of release it. The money we make is the money we make, and we're getting closer towards having a clean slate that we can work from and build a much clearer, much more focused outlook and output from ourselves as a publisher over the next handful of years. I hope that's the case. Fuck.
Ubi seem to have sort of flipped the switch in that they went from being a company that were very good at making games and very good at marketing to they were still good at making games, but they had a few mediocre releases and people weren't like overly, they're a little bit, maybe they were a little bit bland and they weren't quite as good as the halcyon days of certain titles, certain IPs. And then they just seem to flip a switch and go, do you know what? We're going to shut off the marketing side of it. And we're just going to pump the games out still. And we're still going to make them. We've still got an audience. We still know people are going to play our games, but we're just going to kind of put them out. And if you buy them, you buy them. If you don't, you don't. Because it's been a weird period where I would say that they could have done a lot more with the catalogue that they have had, and they could have sung about them more, and they could have made more of each thing they've put out, and then let people, fair enough, they come out and they say, do you know what, this was a 7 out of 10. You said it was, you were really hyping it up and talking about it, but it's only a 7 out of 10. That's not that bad. But to kind of just not even say anything and just drop games out like repeatedly and go, meh.
Yeah.
That feels to me more like what they've done recently.
And it creates a situation where the better games amongst those crop get kind of lost in the weeds a little bit. And I think there's an argument to be made that the best 2 games that they've released in the last 2 years, the last 18 months, are Immortals Phoenix Rising and Riders Republic. And they feel like 2 that kind of got left by the wayside a little bit for one reason or another.
And both very good games, which doesn't make any sense because like Phoenix Rising was actually was a really good game and got reviewed like very well, and it was like a surprise hit, like a bit of a sleeper hit when people picked it up. And
I think it was better than Valhalla for that full period, personally.
Yeah, and then even like we say, I think there was more of a push for the beta of Riders Republic. It felt like before they actually, and then they didn't really push the actual game when Riders Republic itself released. It just kind of happened. Yeah, which is so odd. Which they did a similar thing with Watch Dogs Legion in that they were sort of yelling and shouting about that game for years, and like you say, suddenly it just kind of got released right alongside Assassin's Creed and Immortal Phoenix Rising, and it was like, oh, what a strange kind of thing.
Yeah,
that they just slipped it out. Very weird.
It is all very odd, and I really hope, because fundamentally I like Ubisoft when they're at their best, and I hope, like, free-to-play projects put to one side for a moment, whether it's the second coming of that Prince of Persia remake, whether it's the planned Splinter Cell remake, or...
I will say Far Cry 6, I think, was the notable exception to the marketing push and the release. I think they went hard on that.
Well, like, Far Cry feels like it's just about in that Assassin's Creed kind of phase now where you expect the marketing to be of a similar note to previous entries in the series, and you expect the sales to back that up. And I think that tends to happen. I didn't hear any real reports about Far Cry 6 doing notably poorly last year. It's the first time since Far Cry 2 that I haven't bought one at launch, but I just don't know. But I did buy it eventually, so they got my money one way or another.
It's still on my list, but it's not something I picked up already because it was just one that...
Do you know what, Jonesy? I'm going to say it to you now. You don't need to rush to play Far Cry 6.
Right, yeah. And I think that's the problem, right?
Yeah. Especially with, like... Do you know what? This is not a way that I encourage consumers to actively think, but it is one of the weird sort of almost reverse psychology things that might continue to happen in gaming, is that, like, if you're a publisher like Ubisoft, the better track record you get for improving your games and adding to your games over time. And you think about that in the case of either good games like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, that again only got better and only got fleshed out with more content, or bad games like Ghost Recon Breakpoint that needed fixing and then needed additional content. You create this strange scenario where more and more the story is that the best time to play any given Ubisoft game is around a year after it came out, because that's when it's going to be bug-free, full of content, riddled with microtransactions too, sure, but there'll be content and it probably won't crash.
I did actually just find an article that was released. It was the Metro, which is a UK newspaper, in October of last year, that said that the digital sales for Far Cry 6 were 50% down on Far Cry 5. And its second week, it was down 66% on its first week. So really not great, specifically from the UK. But
that's
again,
not great.
I think the problem is that with a company like Ubisoft, even if you try and push like Far Cry 6, if you're constantly not pushing games and seemingly just trying to slip them out, I think it kind of puts a little bit of a sour taste in people's mouths, and they worry a little bit about your offerings on a whole, not just game specific. So maybe that's why.
It's
a weird one.
I really feel like, I know I just said this, but I really feel like the objective now, whether is like, take a couple more examples of the games that they have been shitting out very quietly lately. I think Prince of Persia falls into that category. I think that Roller Champions falls into that category, and I think any kind of free-to-play projects in the Division or Ghost Recon world, if either of those two things ever materialize, get those things out quite quietly, if possible, make your money, if there's money to be made, and then take projects like the reboot of Skull and Bones, Beyond Good and Evil if it still exists, Avatar, Frontiers of Pandora, which could be a big AAA game, the Star Wars game being worked on by Massive Entertainment, who I think have some pedigree based on the two Division games, and even the Splinter Cell remake, and try and like refocus around a big core group of polished AAA titles that all, again, when we're talking about Splinter Cell reboot, when we're talking about Avatar, when we're talking about Star Wars, all feel kind of different. They don't feel like Ubisoft staples necessarily. And just try and frame the future of the company, the short-term future of the company around that, and then start to add the Assassin's Creed and the Far Cry's and whatnots when you have them and when they're ready back into that catalogue, hopefully with some new and fresh ideas along the way, because Lord knows those series need them.
Absolutely. No, I think you were absolutely right when you said it's kind of like they're cleaning the slate, like they're trying to tuck away a lot of the older IP stuff, and they're just trying to move on, and they're trying to get to new stable of games.
It just feels like I go back to that skill up review for Extraction to bring it back to that game, and he makes an observation like hey, there's matchmaking in this, but he honestly believes that if you buy this game and don't have friends buy it with you in 6 months' time, like there's no guarantee you'll regularly find people to play with. And this is a co-op only game. And I kind of agree with him, unless this builds some like crazy community in the same way Siege did, and I'm just not seeing it for some reason.
Right.
This really does feel like, hey, let's get out the door, let's tick that box, let's make the money we make on it, then draw a line under it and move on. And that's what I'm going to do. Draw a line under it and move on. I will also say, not quite gaming, but I watched some television this week, and I want to give a particular shout out. Never shout out TV shows, not a TV guy, but back in December, MacGruber finally got his own TV show. MacGruber, I'm going to say one of the funniest films of all time. I know that's bold. I know most people won't agree, but you don't create a podcast and put yourself in it unless you're out here to make wild and crazy statements, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make wild and crazy statements. MacGruber is one of the funniest movies of all time, and this new TV show that acts as a kind of a sequel to the movie is very funny as well. I'm only a handful of episodes in, but I'm thoroughly enjoying it, especially seeing new actors like Lawrence Fishburne and Billy Zane kind of being thrown into the mix and clearly very much enjoying themselves, as they should be. And the other thing I want to quickly say, going back to something a little bit more gaming related, is I did my kind of like biannual emulator check-in this week.
Okay.
Because, I always read reports, especially on Reddit, about emulators making certain progress in certain areas or improving, or the list of compatible games growing. And this week I went back to RPCS3, which is a PS3 emulator, which has come on leaps and bounds over the last handful of years. And for a platform that looked like it was going to be really hard to emulate for a little while, is now actually in a really solid, stable, reliable state, and also really accessible. You don't really have to faff around with it too much. Obviously, not going to promote piracy on this platform. We're not against piracy in any form, and neither are the creators of these emulators. But if you have a means to engage with that software without piracy, then it's really cool, and there's a lot of fun to be had. I went back and played little chunks of 50 Cent Blood in the Sand, Army of Two: The 40th Day, Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, and X-Men Origins Wolverine Uncaged Edition. Ooh. So only the best of the best when it comes to that generation of games. And I'm happy to say they all ran well on RPCS3, and I had a good time.
Do you know what's strange about emulation is that I often emulate games as well, and I like go and like you, I kind of have like an annual thing where I'm like, oh, let me like get an emulator and let me have a play. I would never dream of getting a PS3 emulator.
Right, I know. It's crazy.
Because it's like, if I'm going to emulate stuff, it's going to be NES, SNES, what do you call it, Mega Drive,
yeah,
like maybe like GameCube or a push. But to me, anything newer than that is like, well, it's basically just come out. So why would I emulate it?
It feels weird,
stupid. Yeah, it feels too, but it's not new. It is old, and they're completely valid things to emulate. And like you say, they're a lot harder to get good emulators that run sort of like the more up to date. Yeah, so that's cool, man.
I think the Xbox 360 emulator, I think it was called Xenia the last time I checked, and that was really lagging behind the PS3 side of things. And of course, like some platforms, like the original Xbox, like are still not that easy to emulate in some cases. I think different hardware creates different problems for these for the guys who create these pieces of software and these emulators. And so that was really fun to go back to and play. As I said, I've got to reiterate, 4 of the best, if not the 4 best pieces of software released for the PlayStation 3, full stop. In particular, 50 Cent Blood in the Sand.
Nice, very nice. Yeah. Okay, well, I'm gonna sort of do what you did, because I did not play that much this week, but I did watch some stuff. So
okay,
I will. I'll probably go more hard on the movies probably, but I did get to play something because, as I alluded to earlier, after playing and finishing Metroid Dread, and then reading like subsequent comments that people had left on the videos and like what people had said in the Discord, I felt compelled to go and play another Metroidvania and see how it fared compared to Metroid Dread, because I think there's a lot of people have been saying Metroid Dread's really good, but then some people have been saying it's not as good as a lot of the other Metroidvania games that are out there. So I thought I would have a little go at Hollow Knight on the Nintendo Switch. And I would say, do you know what? I would say first impressions of it were like, it's much better looking. I preferred the overall aesthetic to it. I thought it was a much more interesting take, but I understand the difference with Metroid is kind of set in how it's going to look. It can't really, stray from how Metroid games are supposed to look. So that's not Metroid's fault at all. It's just a personal preference. I like the art style for Hollow Knight. I always thought it was, that it's quite a cute little thing. You're this little sort of ghost character wearing a little bone helmet thing, and you've got a little pin, and it's all fighting bugs and insects and stuff. It's got a nice aesthetic to it, and it is a lot of fun, and it is a cool game. I will say that I definitely had some similar issues that I had with Metroid Dread. Not as different issues, but that were similar in the sense of there's often times when I'm like, I do not know where I'm supposed to go from here. To the point, like I did with Metroid on 2 occasions, I actually busted out a walkthrough and was like, where do I go? Because I genuinely was wandering around in the dark, effectively, because in Hollow Knight, you only get maps for areas that you're in from this dude who's a cartographer who's mapping the area, and you've got to like find the dude and be like, oh yeah, I want to buy this map of you. And so found myself in the same position that I was in Metroid Dread a couple of times, in that being like, I don't even have a map for this. At least in Metroid, I had a map that showed me where I was in relation to like the area I'm in. So had to like try and, where the hell is the map dude in this area, and managed to find the guy in a couple of the areas I got to. But that aside, like the kind of not quite knowing where I'm supposed to go sometimes, I think I am preferring it to Metroid Dread. It's much more of a, because I prefer the way it is much more like you have a home base area that you can get back to. There's fast travel as well, which I'm so grateful for. Like, that's what I often thought in Metroid you needed. You needed the ability to go, I want to go to there. I can get there quickly by going here. You can make routes shorter by sort of going, well, I want to go to there. If I go via this place, get the fast travel to this location, I can then get there much quicker. And you can, the way that you just grind for money, basically, and you have the more traditional, like you've got shops and you can buy stuff. I liked all of that. So yeah, very cool game. Preferred the aesthetic. Still some of those issues for sure. But
difficulty wise, because I always heard that Hollow Knight was a challenging game, but obviously Metroid Dread is challenging in its own right, albeit with very boss heavy difficulty spikes. How does Hollow Knight rank?
Hollow Knight's not difficult if in that. I mean, maybe I'm. To be fair, maybe I'm just not far enough into it. I've not had any bosses that I'm. How many bosses have I fought? I need about 3 or 4 in Hollow Knight, so not many. So I don't think I'm that far into the game yet. It's probably too early to judge. But no, by the top, the first bosses I encountered in Metroid Dread were much more challenging, and it felt like I was having to like learn their patterns much more. Whereas I think in Hollow Knight, it feels much easier to go into a battle, go into a fight. But then I will say, Metroid Dread, when you die in a boss fight, you effectively come back to life right outside the area, and you can just go and have another go. Hollow Knight is not quite the same as that. If you've saved the game nearby, if there's a bench nearby and you've saved, you can then, but you might have to run through, a fair few screens in order to get back to that boss. So maybe in some sense, the difficulty, it's not supposed to be quite as challenging in that sense. There's still difficulty there for sure. Like I've died numerous times, and you've got to go and get your little shadow to get your money back, which can be annoying. Oh,
so they're almost Soulsborne elements at play there.
Yes. Although it's not that it's very forgiving in the sense of, because I did at first think that, let's say you're fighting a boss who's killed you and you're like, shit, okay, that was quite tough. I'm probably going to die again. And I was thinking, oh, my little ghost thing that I have to take out to get my money back is going to be where the boss is. And if I've got to go fight that boss again, then I'm going to have to try and like get my little ghost thing at the same time. And I'm probably going to die again, which means I won't be able to get my money back. Because I'll just die and then that'll reset. That doesn't really happen. They move the little ghost thing where you died one screen like away from the boss, so you can have a nice little soft match, getting your money back, and then you can go and fight the boss again. And if you lose again, you know that you're going to get it back. But so yeah, I'm sure that it's just that I haven't hit the difficult elements of that game yet. I've only unlocked trying to think of. I've only unlocked one additional way to move, which has now given me the ability to go into areas that I couldn't get into before. So I'm pretty early on. Like I'm the first few hours into that game. But no, it's cool. It's got a cool art style. I like some of the narrative. I like some of the way that it's, some of the characters are dicks and like, give you shit and stuff. I quite like that. Getting into it. Hopefully I'm gonna stick with it and we'll see how it goes.
For sure. I'm curious about it as well. It's a game that I think actually occupies a similar part of my mind as to what it sounds like it did on your end, which is that if I finish Metroid Dread and still have a hankering to explore other elements of or other explorations of that Metroidvania style of game design. As someone who hasn't really spent that much time with it, I could see myself maybe trying something like that. Because it's also it's funny, in and amongst all this Metroid Dread stuff, I was saying in recent episodes of the podcast that I haven't played that many Metroidvanias, and maybe that's why I'm not clicking with some of the elements that are kind of new to the formula that they perhaps introduced to shake things up for people who were extremely familiar with it. And then I'm reminded that two of my favourite games that Xbox first party have released exclusively on Xbox platforms are the two Ori games, Ori in the Blind Forest, Ori and the Will of the Wisps, which are at their heart, at their core, Metroidvania titles, and I loved them. So maybe I was selling myself a little bit short there, and maybe Hollow Knight ends up being a middle ground. I don't know. We'll see.
But it's literally the thing I did, I googled the best Metroidvanias, and I found a list that was like, Hollow Knight is the best Metroidvania, and I was like, okay, let me see, how, because I know Hollow Knight's newer, so it will be more available. And on the Switch, it was on sale, so I think it was like 10 quid, and I was like, for 10 quid, I'm all over that.
Yeah, it's a good price.
But then I got to see something, not play something, but see something that I did really enjoy, which was Ghostbusters Afterlife.
Oh, okay.
Which I managed to go to the cinema and check out, which I was amazed it was still available to go and see it.
Nice, yeah.
But in my because you could get it on Sky TV now. Like, you can buy it or rent it.
So that's interesting. Like, do you and your wife not have a conversation where you're like, well, we could just sit at home and put it on the big screen and get some popcorn here? Or do you really like that cinema experience that much?
I love the cinema experience. We have unlimited cards for the cinema, so it's free to go. And so I used to work there as well, like this Cineworld that we went to, and it was the first Cineworld in the country, and that's where we met. So it's got a
Pretty
special place in our hearts. So we were like, no, let's go and check it out, and because I really want to see Ghostbusters Afterlife, and my wife wanted to see it as well. So went and saw that, and thought it was fantastic. Like, really enjoyed it. It's quite funny actually, because it was similar to The Matrix in some ways. The Matrix 4, in that it's a new film, but definitely has elements of the original in order to like trip that nostalgia switch in you.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So not obviously it's not trying to be another Ghostbusters film in the sense of the original, where it's like, oh, we're the Ghostbusters. It's not that. It's very, very different to that. But there are I don't want to spoil it just in case people who haven't seen it. But there are definitely elements to it where it's like, pulling very hard on the original source material.
That's where I got. I mean, you made the Matrix comparison, but that's where I got Spider-Man elements, because I remember one of the things that was strange about Spider-Man was that while that film was in production, was being filmed, there were all kinds of rumors circling around, and certain outlets were more than happy to confirm those rumors as probably more than just rumors, like, hey, this is the plan, this seems like this is what's happening. And by the time that film was made and was ready and was about to come out, you looked at the trailers and the promotional material and the marketing, and it was very clear from a Marvel perspective, oh no, these aren't open secrets, these are spoilers. And so everyone, us included here at the Super Show, treated them as spoilers and didn't talk about anything we weren't meant to talk about. The same thing happened to me with Ghostbusters, where I watched all the trailers and looked at all the posters and all this stuff, and I was like, oh, I know then there's an element here that I thought everyone knew, and you're treating it as a secret, I guess? Or maybe I'm just conflating a secret with a surprise and being a spoil sport.
I think what you're talking about in that is not. It's not. I think that it's fine if you know that. What I think.
I thought everyone knew that. I thought that was the point.
But it's a kind of a minor thing. There's something else which actually was given away by the trailers, which I then knew because of the trailer, which kind of about who they're going up against and who the bad guys are. Effectively, which I didn't know, which I kind of guessed because of the trailer, but I'm annoyed that it gave it away in the trailer. Now, in hindsight, because I'm like, you didn't need to give away that. You could have kept that to yourself, and you could have. I think I would have had a better experience not knowing that. More of a like, oh, that's so cool kind of moment, which unfortunately I'd had ruined for me.
But did you still get some, oh, that's so cool moments? Because
I did.
With Spider-Man, you're talking about like 20 years of nostalgia. With Ghostbusters, you're talking about like 40, right? Like, and obviously for you, some of it was before your time, right? Actually, you could you have seen Ghostbusters at the cinema? The second one, maybe?
So the first one came out the year I was born, 1984, so couldn't have seen that, but I saw the second Ghostbusters film at the cinema.
There you go. Okay,
when
cool.
I was like 5 years old. I saw it in America because I used to go to America a lot when I was a kid, and over there you can see whatever you want at any age. So I went to see so many R-rated films as a kid, like young kid, because my nan would just like take me and my brother to the cinema and go, yeah, they can go watch it. And then she'd go and watch a film she wanted to watch. While me and my brother were like 10 years old watching like Mortal Kombat or something.
I like that.
Yeah. So, and we used to get like free refill on our ices. So you just like come in and go out and like get, cane ice frozen drinks all the time. But yeah, and I remember when the second Ghostbusters movie came out, and this is, I actually got a bit of weird nostalgia, like after the fact, after I left the cinema, because I'd been there, seen the film, I had popcorn and stuff, obviously, while I was there, because I love a bit of the popcorn. And I suddenly remembered that when I was a kid, you could get ghosts in a can when Ghostbusters 2 came out, and it was an actual can that said, like, do not open, contains ghost, and you had a ring pull on the top. And right. I remember thinking that was real.
Well, was it one of those things where it was like it was a spring inside and it would shoot out some weird, like, wavy...
No, it was empty.
Oh.
It's a ghost.
Oh, I see. Yeah, okay.
So
yeah, but the whole point of Ghostbusters
is
that the ghosts have, like, a physical corporeal form that you can look at and suck into a vacuum.
Yes, but ghosts aren't real. So they were like... It's obviously...
Okay, yeah.
The can was empty, but the idea being that if you open the can, you could just be like, well, yeah, there was a ghost in it. But I remember thinking that it was actually had a real ghost in the can. Have you ever had that where you remember thinking something when you were a kid? So I must have been about 5 years old thinking, oh, you better not open that because there's an actual ghost.
I mean, does Father Christmas count? Like, what
I don't remember that. I don't remember
we're talking about.
I don't remember Father Christmas, like thinking about Father Christmas.
I remember that well enough because I have a younger brother, and I remember getting to the point where I had to keep up the illusion, not just for his sake, but also for mine, because if we both, quote unquote, believed, then stockings were still a thing.
Right, I see what you mean. But no, Ghostbusters Afterlife, I had a bloody good time. I thought it was really good. Really enjoyed it. I'm sure that the nostalgia thing would definitely came into play a decent amount. I'm one of these people as well. Like, I don't think the 2016 Ghostbusters movie was awful. I think it has its place as almost like a parody of the original Ghostbusters, because it's not the same genre. Like, it's like an out and out stupid comedy.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you enjoyed that film, that's great. Like, I've seen it and I thought it was passable as a stupid comedy, but it wasn't a Ghostbusters film, really. It could have been called something else, like, I don't know, Spookbusters, and it would have been probably better if it was called something like that. But this definitely felt like a love letter to the Ghostbusters movies of the 80s, I had a great time. And then moving on from that, I am something else with not quite as much nostalgia, but that I definitely wanted to see, and I finally finished this week, was Dexter New Blood. Which I love the original Dexter series. Well, some of them are a bit hit and miss. Some of them were really good. This was weird. I don't know if I liked it or not. I enjoyed it.
Interesting.
I enjoyed it insofar as it was doing a lot of the stuff that the original Dexter series did. And it's obviously the same character, some of the same characters and things. Two of the same characters actually. But it is definitely new, and some of the stuff they do in the story, I think people might not like. For anyone fans of the original series who haven't seen it yet, and I'm still not exactly sure how I feel about the series as a whole. But
Well, I feel like one of the things about Dexter that I always heard from fans of, as you said, the bulk of Dexter, if not all of it, was that it got so off the rails by that final season and that finale that if nothing else, it almost felt like they were just coming back for a second shot at ending it on a not disastrous note.
Yes. Yeah. And I totally get why people felt that. But actually, I think the problem is because it feels like that, it feels like they were rushing to a conclusion.
Right.
Because it's not a full-length series. I think it's like 10 episodes.
I got to say, it did wrap up faster than, just from an observer standpoint, quite quickly.
And some weird writing as well. Like, there was some odd stuff. Like, there's one episode, for example, where Dexter falls out with his girlfriend, and his son has an argument with his girlfriend, and you kind of get that they're pissed off with each other, and Dexter like breaks up with his girlfriend, and it's kind of like, I guess we're over, sort of thing. And there's even talk about rebounds and da 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 da, and then suddenly in the next episode they're just happy couple again, and you're like, who's writing this? Like, what's happened? Have you just missed out like 2 episodes? You just deleted them because you didn't have time or something to get to finish where you wanted to, and then it kind of happens again, and that other stuff happens far too quickly. Like, for my liking, it was just a bit odd. Yeah, like they
what an
were
odd
rushing
thing
to a conclusion. I think they were rushing through.
But then again, Jonesy, when it comes to TV shows returning from something of a hiatus, you were completely wrong about Twin Peaks: The Return, Twin Peaks season 3, which is one of the best pieces of television ever created. So I don't know what your word is really good for at this stage. So.
Is it? I stopped watching it because it was rubbish.
Twin Peaks: The Return is one of the best pieces of television of all time.
I'll take your word for it because I'm never going to finish it.
I'm more just trying to wind you up more than anything.
Fair enough. I also saw Eternals.
Yeah, you're on your Marvel shit.
Yeah, I was, and I wanted to see this. One of the reasons because so many people had slagged it off, and that always makes it exciting to see something that people are saying is. And it's one of those great ones as well. I love these days where people start saying "get woke, go broke," and you're like, I've got to see it now. Just
this is fulfilling your obligation to watch every movie that the Quartering makes a video about.
Not just him, like loads of people were saying how bad it was, and I'm like, it can't be that bad. It literally can't be that bad, which makes me want to see it to go, it can't be that bad, and then to sort of check it out.
And
it wasn't as bad as a lot of people said.
Okay,
it's a weird one in the problem that they have with the Marvel Cinematic Universe in general is now everyone has to justify why they didn't help out during the Great Snapping.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and someone even says it in the film. Why didn't you help out? And they're like, it's not really our job. We just fight these big alien cats. It's like, oh, okay. That seems like a mildly weird mission directive, but yeah, and it's a bit mental. The story's a bit crazy. Like, it tries to do far too much. It doesn't maybe do enough to enjoy it. To be fair, it does. It's quite impressive they managed to introduce all these characters, have a story and a plot, and come to a conclusion of such like a big overarching thing in one film. Like, it could have been a trilogy that they could have done if they really wanted to. Not that I would have wanted to sit through 3 films.
No, yeah.
But it tries to cover a lot of ground, and it does it okay. It's not terrible. I think if you're into the MCU and you like more of that sort of stuff, then you might enjoy it. If you're like me and you're a little bit like you're a surface level, watcher of Marvel stuff, you probably think it's okay as a film, but it's definitely got some sort of shit to it and a bit of like, bit rubbish.
None of the trailers appealed to me in any form, and it does strike me as a film that I'm just going to have to go back to and watch very quickly as I try and recap everything I missed prior to the next big gathering of MCU characters. Even though that now is made infinitely more complicated by the presence of multiple television shows that I've not watched any of yet.
Oh, I really want to spoil it for you, like the end, but I won't.
I mean, I don't,
no, I'm not. I won't. I know it's only the Eternals, but just in case some people are like, "Oh,
spoil it for me after the pod."
All right,
I don't care. Bring it on.
But it's a weird one. Like, it's completely standalone. It actually would have been better if it wasn't a Marvel's movie. If they'd have just made the Eternals and they didn't mention anything else to do with anyone else in that universe, it would have made more sense.
Interesting.
I think it would have just been a standalone movie. Also, Angelina Jolie is weird in that. Like, it's like they put her in the film and then they basically just put her in it and then don't have her in it. Probably because they couldn't afford her for us, to be in the film.
Yeah. I don't know. That struck me as a weird one as well. Even just looking from a distance. I don't really know what you do with Angelina Jolie nowadays. Like, what interests her? Like, she went off directing and now she's back acting a little bit and taking on Marvel films, but like presumably not with the same gusto as Mr. and Mrs. Smith or something like that. Back when she was still jumping around and rolling around Tomb Raider. Times have changed.
She still looks great. She still looks very good.
I mean, yeah. I think actually, I don't want to get into celebrity gossip, but yeah, I think she still gets around.
Oh, right. Okay. One thing I was, because one of the reasons I'd heard about Eternals was because I sort of got into the whole fitness YouTube side of things, like last year and stuff, trying to
I remember,
like,
yeah.
bit fitter, get into go down the gym and stuff. And there was a big thing about Camille Nanjiani, who's in this, who's gone from, like skinny, sort of non-trained dude to jacked up Hollywood type in a very short space of time with like a year. And so I was kind of like, oh, okay, let's see the results of all this hard work that he's put in. Wasn't really worth it. He doesn't really pop his top off. He doesn't really have any scenes where he needs to look super jacked or anything. Probably could have just worn some like muscle suit.
Yeah, I wonder if it's one of those things where like you sign up for a Marvel movie like that and you get a call from a producer. It's like, look, you don't need to do this if you don't want to, but it's part of your contract. Like, we can get you 6 months of personal trainers, nutritionists, and steroids if you want them. And Camille's like, yeah, it's all for free? And it's like, yeah, it's part of your contract. It's like, fuck it, I'll get jacked.
We have the best PEDs money can buy. Do you want them? Yeah, go on then. At this point, like, it's funny because I think when a lot of people talk about actors and how they get like jacked for roles and the fact of like steroid use and PEDs, etc., especially with the Marvel movies, and there's a lot of people saying like they're all on it. Like, of course they are. And then you can't. But when you see a film like a Rock film, or you see that one of the Hemsworths or whatever, who's the big Hemsworth? Chris Hemsworth. When he's Thor or whatever, it makes the movie, right? You need these epically butch dudes, and you can see why they do it. Yeah. Camille Nanjiani in the Eternals kind of seems like probably wasn't worth it. You've put your heart under a bit of strain. You're looking great, but might not be worth it. Maybe drop off the peds. Get back down to a decent size, and you'll be fine. Like, don't maybe get off the gear for now. Just eat right, do the fitness stuff, but yeah, do it the natural way, because can't really see much of a future as the next Rock. But hey, who am I to tell him?
No, he tried it. It's like when I shaved my head during lockdown. You just got to try these things, Jonesy.
That's true. That's true. Just got to give it a go.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's nearly everything. I did try one other thing that I did want to mention.
Yeah.
Can you tell that I'm trying to drag out this other stuff just because we've only got one thing to talk about this week?
You're doing a wonderful job so far.
Thank you. Yes. So I saw an interesting thing that said, so I got the old VR out recently because the kids wanted to have a go and they wanted to try out some, I think Space Pirate Trainer is still one of the best. So my 5-year-old wanted to play some Space Pirate Trainer, so we had a go at that. He thought it was wicked. I was surprised it fit because he's got a little head, but it worked quite well. So he was on the Vive. But I'm always interested to see the next big thing coming to VR. And Jamie, I saw a demo on Steam, nonetheless, for a little bit of VR filth.
Oh, yeah.
Let me see how it's progressing, how they're coming along. Absolutely insane. We're all going to die because no one's going to be doing
oh my God, don't do this to me.
Real humans. It's getting too real now.
Do you know the name of the VR filth that you interacted with, just for research purposes?
I cannot remember. I'll try and look it up for you, and then I'll spin you a thing.
In that case, you need to describe in vivid detail the nature of this filth that you found.
I'm not going to do that. Safe to say that it is. It was only a demo, so it was pretty brief and kind of boring, to be fair. But it was one of the things I always find amazing about VR is the room scale stuff. So it's when you can move around and you can feel like you're in an environment, you can get up and you can move about in that space. And I think it adds a whole level of realism that like the seated VR stuff doesn't have to it. And yeah, it is. I could just seeing what it's like now and with demos and stuff, just where it's going to go in the future. I am worried for the future of the world, especially with Meta coming online and Zuckerberg trying to get us all confined to our homes forevermore.
I still need a clearer picture here, though. Was this a female character model, perhaps, that you were interacting with?
No, these are like you don't interact. It's like these character models boning just like away to the side, but you can like walk around. So like, let's say they're just lying there on a desk.
So it's a voyeur simulator. You're just kind of like watching people fuck.
It's a game. Like it's supposed to be a full-on game when it gets released. So I was reading up about it. It's going to be like a proper. I can't remember the style of. I can't remember the goddamn genre of game it's going to be. But I don't know how they're going to weave this into the narrative of the game. But apparently it's on Steam. It's like, oh yeah, we're going to be a big game that you'll be able to play. But it's also going to have boning in the game. And I was like, okay, that's weird. Let me have a little demo. Let me have a look at the demo. But yeah, it's a scary thing when you can see the future and you can see that it's just going to end humanity as we know.
I can't wait. I can't wait to get my VR fucking porno on.
Yeah, but this is the other thing. It's all because it's all going to be CG. It's not going to be humans.
I'm going to go both ways. Because I've still never had a regular VR porn experience, so I'd like to do that once as well.
Right.
You know, I want to do it all.
Have you got VR? Have you got VR?
I don't have a headset. No.
I thought you did have a headset. Oh, you haven't got a headset. Okay,
no, I played the Oculus Quest 2 at my brother's house over Christmas, and Chris is currently the proud owner of the Oculus Rift that was given to Ultimate Gaming back in the day.
Right.
I personally do not own a VR headset. I am not made of money.
I need to get back into it. I need to do some more VRing because when I don't do it for a long time and then I try it out again, I'm still blown away by how good VR is. Even though I've got the original Vive, I really want to try out the PlayStation VR 2. I think it's going to be wicked.
Yeah.
I really want to have a go at that when it gets put out, hopefully later this year.
Yeah. If there's some cool homebrew stuff that allows some kind of PSVR 2 compatibility with PC games, especially if obviously we don't know about the futures of games like Half-Life Alyx and whether or not they're going to get ported, I'd be into something like that if it were plausible.
Right. Yes. No, that's a great shout. Yeah. If it is, you can get it to work on the PC side of stuff. That'd be cool. Because
some smart person will do something.
Well, the cost is still so prohibitive when it comes to the PC side of things. Like when you look at the very top end stuff, you're still talking like thousands of pounds to get yourself set up with a decent VR setup.
Yeah.
But then you have the Quest 2, like we said before, which is like 300 quid for the base level, which is amazing that you can just hop in and play that.
And it's there and it's all compact and it's,
and it's wireless.
Yeah.
There we go. That's the future. The future of VR, Quest, hopefully. Oh, no, it's not. It's probably going to be the new, whatever the new thing. I can't remember what they're calling it. The new one.
Whose new one?
My Facebook's.
Oculus have a new headset that's been announced already.
Not announced. I think it's like rumor mill stuff.
Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, yeah, like they're so in on the kind of like the metaverse stuff that the Oculus brand will keep producing headsets for years to come, I'm sure.
No, yeah, absolutely, yeah, exactly.
And they're only going to get better.
And that will be the scary future where we all die because everyone's watching CG people bone instead of doing it themselves. Anyway, let's move on to the big news story of the day. We've wasted enough time with frivolous topics about other things. It is time to talk about Microsoft's epic buyout of... See, I've ruined it now because I said epic and now people are going to get confused. Their massive buyout of Activision Blizzard.
Oh, massive. The Ubisoft studio. The ones... They made The Division, right? Yeah.
The big buyout of Activision Blizzard.
EA Big. I'm with you.
For a staggering $68.7 billion. So this was obviously announced this week, and it should be going through in 2023. I think it sort of came out originally. Someone sort of half leaked it, and then I think the confirmation came pretty soon after, if I'm right. It was very sort of short amount of time that it was on the rumor mill.
I think it was the Wall Street Journal, if I'm not mistaken, who are kind of hot on the heels of this story, both in terms of kind of tweeting as it was beginning to look more and more likely on the day, and they've had a lot of the scoops since the news broke as well. So shout out to them.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the most ridiculous thing about this, of course, is that we were still reeling from the Zynga buyout by Take-Two last year, which was sort of $12.7 billion, and this is like 6 times that, which is absolutely insane. It's also insane because obviously all the news we've seen of Activision Blizzard in the last year or so has been the problems that they've had. I don't even know how to. Jesus Christ, how do you put that into one sentence? All the shit show that Activision Blizzard had with. Shall
I put it into the sentence the same way that the source I looked at for these bullet points did?
Go for it.
The deal comes after a turbulent period for Activision Blizzard following numerous reports of employee misconduct, toxic workplace conditions, and intense pressure on the company's hugely controversial boss, Bobby Kotick. There you go.
Thank you. That is perfect. Yeah, because of course all the news stories we've seen, it's even up to now, they've been talking about like the unionization. We're talking about whether Kotick's going to leave. We were talking about up to sort of 2 weeks ago. We were saying about where do Activision go, and talking about the fact that how do they pull back from this? Their stock price has been going down. They're having a problem with sales, and it's what's the knock on, and then suddenly after all of this talk, you get this epic buyout. And of course, you have to start asking the question, is part of it a PR play? Is because Activision have said, we need to change the script. We need to, make something different happen. We need to get people talking about us for a different reason. And you've got to assume that Microsoft saw a hell of a deal when they, knowing that maybe they would be willing to be bought, because let's be honest, they need to make people think differently of them. And one of the ways you can have people think differently of you, it's like when you have a pub and you say under new management. They can just say under new management, and it kind of wipes away the sins of the past.
No, that's definitely a part of it. I think when you're looking at acquisitions, as I think a company like Microsoft kind of always is, even if it's just out of the corner of your eye, there's a big difference between targeting a particular company or a particular publisher and approaching them and saying, we'd like to buy you. How does this much sound? And what happened in this case, which is the other way around, when a company approaches you and says, hey, we'd like you to buy us. How does this sound? And I think when a deal like that is kind of offered to you, and Microsoft is in the position they're at when it comes to trying to build out their portfolio of intellectual properties, trying to flesh out and add support for and ultimately market products like Game Pass, the prospect of owning Activision, bringing in 10,000 new employees, all with a huge amount of experience working on some of the biggest and best franchises and games at a time where talent is really hard to come by and talent exoduses are happening everywhere. You get all the IP, you get all the franchises, you can support and promote Game Pass. And also, like, we're going to talk a lot about the fate of certain franchises, but let's not beat around the bush. All of a sudden, you own Call of Duty. You own the single biggest home console franchise on the planet. So, yeah, when you reverse it as you just did, and all of a sudden paint this as a picture of Activision struggling and a number of the board of executives and the ownership at Activision saying to themselves, actually, this is a situation that we'd rather sell ourselves out of than work our way out of, then it becomes more of a prospect for Microsoft, and I think that's why they did it, and that's why they moved so quickly. And that it moving so quickly was why no one had a fucking clue this was going to happen until the bombshell dropped. And wow, what a bombshell.
Indeed, it is a hell of a bombshell, and I think let's lay some facts on the table, Jamie. So what have Microsoft actually got for their money? So they have, of course, as you've just said, bought Call of Duty. But what else from the Activision side have they got? They've got Spyro, Guitar Hero, Crash Bandicoot, and Tony Hawk. And from the Blizzard side, they've got World of Warcraft, Diablo, Overwatch, Hearthstone, and StarCraft. And of course, because of the King side of it, because they've also got the mobile arm, they've got Candy Crush as well. So they have bought some of the best known sort of IPs that are in existence. And like you said, Call of Duty is the biggest one of the bunch, but it's certainly not the only big one. The only money
far
spent.
from it. It's also those are the franchises that have been relevant in the last decade or two. There's tens more if you want to go back to the previous century.
They've yes, it is too numerous to sort of to count really. But it's I think, and immediately the first thing that everyone started saying, of course, was, does this break monopoly laws? Does this break anti-competition laws? And I'm sure it's something they're going to have to be looking at over the next year before the deal actually goes through. Because I think we were sort of saying earlier before that we got on the podcast that if you compare the size of this purchase, so $69 billion, you could effectively have bought Sega, Capcom, Square Enix, Konami, Ubisoft, Bandai Namco, and Take-Two for that same amount of money. You can combine all of those together, and for a 90, I think about 95 billion total, you could have also thrown EA in that bunch as well.
Yeah,
which kind of puts this deal into some scale.
The numbers are staggering, and it's been interesting doing a little bit of research myself and trying to look into the numbers, not just the market capitalizations and the values of these company as confirmed by the acquisitions in some cases, but also just looking at revenue and trying to understand, okay, well, why is Activision worth $68.7 billion and Ubisoft is worth in the $6 to $7 billion range? And then you realize that if you look at 2020, Call of Duty alone as a franchise earned double the amount of revenue as Ubisoft did as an entire publisher. You think Ubisoft in 2020 launching all those games we talked about earlier, launching Assassin's Creed Valhalla and Watch Dogs Legion, and it doesn't matter how many fucking games Ubisoft launched in 2020. It doesn't matter, if Rainbow Six Siege had a new season. Call of Duty alone is twice as big as that entire company, and Call of Duty is still the most widely played console game, but above anything else. I think it's 55% of all console owners play Call of Duty.
Which is ironic.
In inverted commas. Which, for
it ain't
reference,
that good.
GT. I know that's the weird thing, but I'm one of them. You're one of them. We're the reason it's at 55%. For anyone wondering, GTA is down at 41%, and that drops to Fortnite at 28%. So Call of Duty is an absolute gargantuan property, and it contributed a lot to this fee, I'm sure, which makes what they do with it even more interesting. But yeah, it is weird when you start to run the numbers. That's for sure.
It's funny because if you kind of said to me, like, if you try and sort of break down gaming into its most sort of obvious. See, if I was talking to someone who didn't know anything about gaming and they were like, "What, tell me gamers. Who are the gamers?" I would be like, kids play Fortnite. Blokes who like sport play FIFA. PC nerds play WoW, and everyone plays COD.
Yeah,
like that's kind of how I would kind of think of it. Like COD is everyone has to play, but it is like literally the biggest pillar, even of those sort of like 4 or 5 pillars of gaming. Is one of those things that you have to play. Everyone plays it. It just comes out every year, and it seems that you don't have a choice. You just buy it, even if you didn't want to play it. You just have to play it. And it might change in the near future. There've been some sort of maybe weird murmurings in the last few months and things off the back of, maybe not for Call of Duty as a franchise, because like Warzone is still doing really well, but when you look at sort of Vanguard and things, you do wonder about what the future holds for them, especially as we've talked about before. The new map maybe didn't have as much of an impact as I'm sure they were hoping it would have on Warzone and things.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take long before a game has a turn and everyone starts playing something else.
True. Honestly, like you've touched on one of the topics that I'm most fascinated to break down, I think, in the coming months and the coming maybe even years, as we slowly start to come to terms of what life looks like for Activision under the Microsoft banner, is that so many people in the short term, and I completely get it, but a lot of the fixation so far in the last 48 hours has been on exclusivity, has been on which Activision Blizzard properties will Microsoft allow to be cross-platform, or perhaps more poignantly, appear on a PlayStation platform, if any. And then, there's been some back and forth on that we'll get to in due course. But beyond that, it's like, okay, let's say that Microsoft aren't fussed about exclusivity when it comes to Call of Duty. Let's say that for whatever reason, maybe there are existing agreements between Activision and PlayStation that need to be honoured and so on and so forth. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that Call of Duty, in terms of its premium $60, this is the video game in a box that you're going to put into a console product, continues to come to all platforms that it does at the moment. Microsoft is still now in charge of that franchise. They still write the checks. They still reinforce, the deadlines. And of course, one of the things we knew, one of the things was very public, whether you didn't even have to read, the insider columns, you could just see in their release schedule, is that Activision under Bobby Kotick, they loved annualized franchises. They loved taking things like even the franchises, some of which you mentioned just then, like Tony Hawk or Guitar Hero. They said, strip this down to a formula, make it annual, make one every fucking year, let's bleed it dry, and when it dies, and when it's dead, fuck it. Call of Duty didn't get to that point, but they have continually flirted with it over the last, 6 or 7 years, let's say. Will Microsoft shake that up? Do Microsoft do the unthinkable and like, hey, you know what? Infinity Ward or Treyarch or Sledgehammer, whoever it is, take a year off. We don't need a Call of Duty this year. Or you know what? You're used to making a game with $50 million? Here's 100. Or you know what? You're used to adapting the same engine you've been using since Modern Warfare? Make a new one. Like, Microsoft can do stuff like that, and that's going to be the part that's really fascinating for me.
There's an interesting side to this as well, because often with big companies, big IPs, big names in like whatever you want, like actors, whatever, they often have a point in their careers or a point in their life cycle that they peak, and then you talk about them in an insane amount because they're at the peak, and then they decline, and then they keep declining because the point was they were at the peak, they were at the zenith, so they were never going to get any bigger than that. And the weird thing with Activision Blizzard is, because of all the shit that's gone on in the last year, because of the turbulent year that they've had, it feels like that they might not have been at their peak. And so maybe this was a great time for Microsoft to buy them, because they've managed to buy them not at their peak, probably for a decent amount of money. They can still make a hell of a lot of money out of them. But there's still the possibility that they have actually kind of topped out, and that they do keep declining, and they keep sort of going down and down and down. So I find it doubly interesting, this deal, because I don't actually know where Activision Blizzard are. And even if Microsoft do say, hey, do you know what, guys, take a year off, we're going to reevaluate stuff, we're going to come back, we're going to have fresh eyes on it. Like you look at a game like Battlefield, which has kind of tried to have that done to it a number of times, and has not managed it.
Yeah.
And I've had problems again and again. You even look at what Activision Blizzard tried to do with the original Battle Royale that they released before Warzone, which was trash. I can't remember what it was called. It was so bad. Like, what was it?
The Call of Duty Battle Royale, or the Battlefield one?
No,
it was Blackout in Black Ops 4.
That was horrendous. Like, that was such a piece of crap.
I think that was an experiment more than anything. But yes, it wasn't great.
Oh, I'm sure. But then it does make you wonder, like, is this them buying, thinking that they're getting a really good deal for something which is worth an insane amount of money, but actually what happens is year after year, market share of Activision Blizzard goes down and down and down, and it becomes less relevant.
It's possible, but we're talking about year after year, it becomes less relevant. Like, I think Microsoft will see themselves as being now masters of their own fate and their own destiny, no pun intended, when it comes to the future of some of those franchises. And I think one of the most encouraging things that, whether you're a fan of Microsoft or a fan of Activision and Blizzard's franchise, and you wonder how Microsoft might handle them, is look at what happened to Halo. They showed that game, they listened to the fan responses, the fan feedback, and they took a game that was meant to come out alongside the launch of their next-gen console, the game that was meant to be the big supporting game for the Xbox Series X, and said, fuck it, if it needs another year, it can have another year.
Yes.
The Microsoft that's willing to delay a Halo game for 12 months and miss a console launch is a good Microsoft for games Call of Duty is one example that we've been focusing on, but especially when we're talking about Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4 and the Blizzard side of things, and how they've really struggled lately with holding on to key personnel members, especially in the senior hierarchy, really struggled with holding on to talent at, the more sort of boots on the ground level of game development. And both of those games now look like they're probably 2023 titles or later, because they've just been having their own troubles. A Microsoft that's willing to give them time, give them space, and give them money, and support them with the rest of the wide studios and the whole infrastructure that Microsoft's building. Because the other thing this now means is that, hey, if you're Blizzard, you have fucking 50 sister companies that you didn't have before to help you in one way or another. I hope that there's a positive outlook for some of the games involved in all of this. Because fundamentally, there are important elements here that we haven't, fully talked about yet, like workplace culture and workplace conditions, like employee misconduct and Microsoft's potential impact on that, positive or negative, like exclusivity, the role of PlayStation and the wider sort of industry-wide outlook for a deal like this. But I don't think it's crazy to hope that the games benefit, and that would be cool for us gamers, because they're the things that end up in our hands at the end of the day. They're the products.
I think I think you're right. I think we can definitely hope that'll be the case. But you touched on it there, so let's talk about it a little bit, because one thing we haven't mentioned up to yet is the fate of Big Bobby Kotick and what is going to happen to him, which is one of the questions that immediately people started posing on Twitter and other platforms as well, which was, does Bobby stay? Does Bobby go? And I think it's kind of been, it hasn't been confirmed, but it has been rumored and suggested and effectively said that once that contract has been sorted, once everything has been decided, and once the ink has dried and the deal has gone through, Bobby Kotick will be getting a very tasty payout of something like $280 million. He will get a pat on the head and he'll get sent on his way. Which, when it comes to this, is talking about it the other day, I think in the WhatsApp group, and I think from my perspective, when I look at something like that, I think that is the best thing that can happen to Activision Blizzard. You have a company that have good standing, whether or not that's true, with the rank and file everyday people who work at Microsoft obviously don't work there, don't have any idea, but that seems to have a good standing in the industry, who are going to take over from Activision Blizzard. That's a completely new management structure. There's people from the top who can say, we're different. We're going to run things like this. I think Microsoft have even said that they're going to take a look at all of their workplace.
Sexual harassment and gender discrimination policies and practices will be reviewed Microsoft-wide.
Exactly, so that they can, going into this, they can make sure that they are seen to be doing everything that they can do from their end. And so I think that will probably have a really good effect on Activision Blizzard as a company, because often the feeling of the employees, the grassroots employees, is one of the most important things. And if they think that stuff's happening and is going to be better, then it will be better, because it'll create a better culture. And one thing that must be horrendous at the moment is just working there and feeling like you work in a toxic place has got to be pretty bad for your esteem in the workplace and everything. Reality of the situation is, and this is what I'd love to get your take on, do you think Microsoft now are too big to actually have any effect on the companies that fall under their umbrella? Is it just policy? Is that effectively what they've boiled down to when they're so big?
I really hope not. I think the temptation would be to fear that to be the case, purely based on the size and the scope of Microsoft itself as the company. There's a part of me that hopes, perhaps naively though, that that they can hone down that sort of the size of Microsoft and instead put it as more of an Xbox-wide focus. You've got the fact that Phil Spencer had a promotion in amongst all of this. He's now the CEO of Microsoft Gaming. I'd like Microsoft Gaming to be its own wing and Xbox to be a big part of that wing, and Phil Spencer to kind of like lead by example on that front, in which case you can have, a more minute and a more specific look at workplace environments. You can keep a hold of and keep a tab on what's going on at every single studio and make sure that the situations that arose at both Activision and Blizzard can't be repeated, that the people who are responsible for those situations arising in the first place are no longer in those places, and that the circumstances that gave rise to those situations aren't allowed to be recreated. Again, when you're talking about Microsoft, you're talking about the second biggest company in the world, right?
Wow, okay.
I think, I might be wrong, I think Apple might be the only company that are bigger. Again, that could be completely off base. But you're talking about
Tesla have got to be as big, right?
Tesla are up there, but the ones I always remember, it's Apple, Microsoft, it's
some oil giant.
There's oil companies, there's Chinese companies obviously as well. There's Google or Alphabet, but Microsoft are always surprisingly.
No, you're right. Number two, Microsoft Corporation are the second biggest by market capitalization, $176 billion.
And so when you think about that, you think to yourself, oh God, I hope that, the down to the individual employee at Activision and Blizzard, that these things don't get lost in the weeds. But I also hope simultaneously that Phil Spencer is kind of like the top of that tree now, that arm, that wing of Microsoft can lead from the front and ensure that those things don't happen again to those people or to anyone.
Right. I'm gonna. Do you know what? I've just opened this Investopedia link where it gives the top companies. I'm gonna give you a little quiz, Jamie. Given that, just to sort of give us a little sideline, because you've nailed it with a few of them. So I think we'll just take a second to just enjoy your knowledge. So number one, who are you saying?
It's Apple.
It is Apple, $365.8 billion. Microsoft, as we said, is second. Number two, $176.3 billion. You've mentioned number three. Who are you going to say?
Alphabet.
Alphabet at number three, $239.2 billion.
I don't know the order for the rest of them. I know in the top 20, I know Facebook will be in the top 20.
So hold on. I'm reading the wrong stat. I'm reading revenue, market capitalization. Let me just quick recap. Apple, 2.9 trillion. Microsoft Corp, 2.6 trillion. Alphabet, 2 trillion. Number four is kind of one that I'm going to take this one because I said some oil company. Saudi Arabian Oil, 1.9 trillion.
Yeah, sure. I honestly don't know. I know that in the top 20, Facebook will be in there somewhere. I know Tencent will be in there somewhere.
Meta Platforms Inc.
Is Tencent in the top 20?
I've only got the top 10 here. Tencent aren't in it. I was shocked at number 8. This should have been the title of the video. Number 8 will amaze you.
Give me a clue on number 8.
Graphics cards.
Nvidia
Corp.
Wow.
Number 8.
Fair play to them.
How the hell are they there?
That's pretty impressive. The number 8 company in the world by market capitalization. I wouldn't have guessed that.
Do you know what that is? Just selling cards so people can mine crypto.
Literally, yeah. I mean, to be fair, that they are a company that somehow has been out of stock of their flagship product for what feels like 18 months now. So yeah, they're doing something right.
Wow, fair play, Nvidia. I would have thought you were nowhere near that list.
Yeah.
So well done, really well done. Sorry. Anyway, I've derailed the conversation. I didn't mean to.
No, not at all. Not at all. I have. Again, I don't want to make this all out to sound like, optimism and positivity when I know that there are lots of different angles to a story like this and a situation like this. And it's not all positive, and it's not that we shouldn't necessarily be optimistic about everything. But, I think that the idea that Bobby Kotick gets to walk away in 2023, potentially, when this deal is done, is a little bit of a bummer. I don't think anyone likes, whether you're Activision Blizzard employee or not, no one likes the idea of him getting handed a check for $300 million and getting to fucking sleuth off into the night when he was the one who oversaw and in some cases hid so many of the things that were going wrong under his watchful eye. I'm not out for I don't want to campaign for justice. I don't even know what justice looks like in a situation like that. That's above my pay grade. But I can see why that would be a little bit that I can see why someone who, if you were an active Activision Blizzard employee and you were campaigning for better circumstances, there are Activision Blizzard employees right now who are on strike, if you look at the case of Raven Software, because of various circumstances. If you were fighting hard, if you were circling unionization, if you were trying to oust Bobby Kotick, if you were trying to pressure the board into ousting him as CEO and so on and so forth, and this happened, and you knew that the outcome for him would be a big payday and he gets to walk away, I can see why you'd be bummed out. But at the same time, I can see why you'd be hopeful that even if things like unionization aren't on the table anymore, that the workplace circumstances, the workplace conditions, that the employee misconduct would improve under Microsoft by one way or another.
I'm going to play devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Briefly.
Good.
In defense of Bobby Kotick.
Oh my God, I did not think there would be that devil's advocate. You really are the devil's advocate. Jesus.
Purely to say...
Can we call this podcast In Defense of Bobby Kotick ...
Yeah, all right. No. Okay. He has been the captain of the ship in the last 18 months and all this shit has gone down, right? He is definitely responsible for, or not responsible, he is irresponsible in letting a lot of what has gone on at Activision Blizzard happen, right? That is absolutely something that should be laid at his door, because at the end of the day, the buck stops with him. That having been said, I do have some slight sympathy, if I'm playing devil's advocate, for the position to say that the reason he can walk away with 280 billion, jeez, I keep saying it, 280 million or 250 million or whatever it is because he's also helmed Activision Blizzard to be worth $69 billion. And if you're gonna, there is a small part of me, and if you're gonna say that someone at the top is responsible, or should take a lot of responsibility for the state of Activision Blizzard and the culture, I completely 100% agree with you. And the fact that maybe he should have been given the boot, or the board should have ousted him, or whatever, I definitely think there's a conversation there. I definitely think the employees have got reason to say that. But at the same time, I think if you hold someone at the top responsible for what happens in the whole company, as you should, you also can't say that it's nothing to do with them when you get a company is worth $70 billion. So Gold, I think one of the best things that can happen is just to get rid of him, refresh the culture, and try and claw back some of what Activision Blizzard.
There's also the issue, though, that as we established last week, where up until I think it was last year, which was the first time ever that he took the minimum that he was allowed to take, this is a guy that claims 9-figure compensation bonuses on an annual basis based on how well he's done. CEOs like this are compensated on an annual basis for what he has grown this company into as CEO. Do you need an extra 300 million as a goodbye message?
No, of course he doesn't. No, absolutely not. But it will literally be a legalese thing. It'll be the case of in his contract it says
the wording apparently is that in his employee contract, if he is terminated as a result of a change of control of the company, then the 293 million fee is that which is agreed if that takes the place, and that is fundamentally what we believe will take place.
So, and no one wants to give him that money, but at the end of the day, it's a small, given that they're buying the company for 70 billion, it's a small price to pay to acquire the company. Like if imagine if they'd said, do you know what, Microsoft aren't going to buy Activision Blizzard because they don't want to give Bobby Kotick $280 million. Like that would be completely pointless. Like they pay him the money, get rid of him. At the end of the day, there are greener pastures. You need to move past this. I think kind of lamenting the fact that he's getting a big payout is kind of pointless at this stage. I think everyone should just say, do you know what? Don't even worry about him anymore. He's probably going to come into work 2 days a month for the next year before the deal goes through. He's going to probably have barely anything to do with it. They'll be flying Microsoft people in to sort of sort everything out. Forget about Big Bob. Let him go and I don't know, live on a beach somewhere and do whatever he's going to do. Don't worry about him.
Yeah.
But,
do you know what, Jody? I wasn't going to.
So yeah, do you know what? We should stop worrying about him as well. He can sod off and go and do more movies if he wants. If anyone will have him.
Moneyball 2, anyone?
Moneyball 2. But as we sort of talked about earlier, the exclusivity question I think is one of the most interesting, because as we've said, they've already confirmed that they will honor their existing contracts. So the games that are going to be coming out to PlayStation and things, they've said that Call of Duty will remain on the PlayStation, but it definitely adds an interesting air for the future, because you've got to imagine Xbox aren't just going to keep pumping everything out to PlayStation. They're going to be able to pull all those levers, control everything. And a lot of contracts these days are going to, they're quite short-lived. Like if you think about the fact contracts are signed when the games are being made, when the games come out is kind of almost the end of the conversation. So if you're looking at Activision Blizzard games in the future, Microsoft can do whatever the hell they want with them past like 2023.
Oh, totally. And do you mind for a second if I quickly do the direct quotes that have come out in the last 48 hours?
No, go for it.
Because it's interesting to see how vague they appear to be at certain points and whether or not people have different interpretations of them. Because the initial comment that Spencer made when the acquisition was announced was, quote, Activision Blizzard games are enjoyed on a variety of platforms and we plan to continue to support those communities moving forward. Sony then made a statement via the Wall Street Press saying, quote, we expect that Microsoft will abide by contractual agreements and continue to ensure Activision games are multi-platform. And then Spencer went on Twitter earlier today to respond saying that Xbox intends to, quote, honor all existing agreements and more specifically, quote, keep Call of Duty on PlayStation. And you and I were joking about this before we started recording, where even what seems like the most direct statement of all of those quotes, the plan to, or the intent to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation, can mean so many different things. Like if Warzone remains on PlayStation, is that keeping Call of Duty on PlayStation? You can read between the lines on this in a lot of different ways, and I don't know. Yeah.
Well, you've already made an important point earlier, which was when Microsoft are pulling the levers of control with Activision Blizzard. Let's say that they do turn around. They say to Treyarch, they say to Sledgehammer Games, hey guys, why don't you take a year off? Hey guys, why don't you not worry about it? We'll come back to it. We'll revisit in 2 years' time, and we'll put a pin in the sort of annualization stuff for the time being. That's going to have massive knock-ons for Sony, for PlayStation, and you're still honoring contractual obligations. You're still you can still say that, oh yeah, but next time it comes around, Call of Duty will be on the PlayStation. But even like pausing it for a year, or the way they do the releases, the way they handle releases, timed exclusives, when certain things come to certain platforms, like you said, it's so ambiguous the way they've said Call of Duty will remain on PlayStation. It leaves them so many options. It's definitely interesting.
Especially like we have the benefit now of being able to see what Xbox have chosen to do, or what they appear to be choosing to do actively in the case of their acquisition of Bethesda, right? And in that case, I can't remember where the figure came from, but I remember at some point hearing that the figure that Microsoft were looking at in terms of a loss of revenue as a result of games like Starfield later this year, and in the future, a new Elder Scrolls, a new Fallout, whatever the case may be, and so on and so forth, ad infinitum, not arriving on PlayStation, was akin in the immediate sense to around $500 million.
Right.
That was $500 million that Microsoft were willing to essentially forego as a means of, okay, let's look at it less as lost revenue on potential, PlayStation sales and more as marketing or promotional expenditure on Game Pass.
Yep.
I think when they've said that they're willing to do that much, it suggests that they're in a powerful position to do this with as many things as they want to when it comes to Activision Blizzard's properties. And I think it's just going to be a case of Xbox evaluating on a case-by-case basis what makes sense for cross-platform and what doesn't. Obviously, PlayStation seemed very intent on making sure everyone know that there are existing agreements in place. And like you said, we don't know what that means. And hey, even if there weren't existing agreements in place, maybe there's a part of Xbox that like looks at the whole thing and is like, actually, do you know what? Call of Duty on PlayStation continues to make sense. I think a more direct example I can give is if I look at Blizzard, I think Diablo 4 makes perfect sense as an exclusive title. Diablo 4's got Game Pass written all over it. I think, so much time has passed since Diablo 3. It feels weird to say that, but it's kind of true that, like, I think introducing players to Diablo and a potentially, new and fresh and exciting Diablo, certainly a very pristine and sharp-looking Diablo game for the first time makes sense. And I think keeping that as a big exclusive, because it would be a big tentpole release, makes sense. On the flip side, Overwatch 2, is Overwatch 2 a big revenue generator? Yes, in the long term, because obviously it sells millions and millions of copies. But from what I remember, like, Overwatch is not a full-price title. I think the PS4 version launched at around £20 or £30. Maybe that's something where they say, actually, because of the state of Overwatch, the anticipation or the hype for Overwatch 2, or lack thereof, the advancements in crossplay and the fact that that's at the place where it is, maybe Overwatch 2 is a game that actually benefits from just having as many players as possible, and then like maybe you end up in a situation where Overwatch is free on Xbox and PC via Game Pass, but it's on PlayStation for £20,
Right.
And it's like, then we get revenue and we get players, and that's a game that makes sense to have a populated player base because it benefits us and everyone. And then if there are microtransactions and so on and so forth, that's still our money because, hey, it's a Microsoft published game on a PlayStation platform, which sounds crazy to say out loud, but like that's the reality.
I think you're bang on. To me, it completely makes sense that you keep as Xbox or Game Pass, whatever exclusives, things that make sense. So, single player, multiplayer games that kind of are a contained environment whereby you can say, you buy this, you play this with us, and you have it on your Xbox, on your PC, whatever, with Game Pass, or you buy it for your Xbox. But when it comes to the games that generate a shitload of money through the like online markets and stuff, like your battle passes for Warzone, or like you're going to buy crate skins or whatever it is for a game like Overwatch, it seems to make sense to make those crossplay, still put them through the PlayStation.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, you want that player base to be as big as possible. But you do get to a strange situation, and I could see this happening, and it doesn't fall foul of them saying, we'll keep Call of Duty on on PlayStation, is that they start to say things like, okay, we're having a new Call of Duty game coming out, this new like modularized version of Call of Duty, whereby it's, you've got the multiplayer, you've got the single player, and you've got Warzone, and you've got zombies are all individual elements. So do you know what? You can get Warzone and you can get multiplayer on the PlayStation, but you can only get the single player campaign and you can only get zombies on the Xbox.
Yeah, maybe.
Which would be really weird, but I could absolutely see them, if they decided to, I could see them going that kind of route, because they're like, do you know what? Whilst they fall under the umbrella of Call of Duty, it's a modularized game where you don't have to have every module of that game on every platform. And it doesn't really make any sense for us to give you the Call of Duty campaign on the PlayStation when just get it on Game Pass. Game Pass is a completely affordable thing. You can have it on PC, you can have it on your Xbox.
And
which would be weird. That would be weird, but I could see it happening.
It would be weird, but like, again, the other door that keeps open, if we looked at the scenario that you just created there, is that you can still charge people for products on a PlayStation that in theory they're not being charged for on the Xbox. And then you end up in this weird situation where, like, we have like a WhatsApp group with a few different people in it, and when we were discussing this deal, it was Martin Ruffle from Just Interesting that was like, I think I need an Xbox in some form.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, let's take a situation where, let's say, and this is not going to happen, but let's say for the sake of argument, Microsoft kept everything cross-platform that Activision and Blizzard would have kept cross-platform. So Overwatch is cross-platform, Diablo is cross-platform, Call of Duty remains cross-platform, and so on and so forth. And then you end up in a situation where you take someone like Martin or like in someone in that position who just owns a PlayStation, and they look at their calendar and they're like, okay, this year I want to buy Diablo 4, I want to buy the new Call of Duty, I want it just so happens that Elder Scrolls 6 is coming out this year, I want what Arcane are making, I want the new Doom, I want that Indiana Jones game, I want and all of a sudden, how many games are there that you need to want that are full price on a PlayStation before you say to yourself, hang on a second, I'm spending the same amount of games on my PlayStation as it would cost to buy a Series X or a Series S and a subscription. You know, a Series S and a subscription, I don't know how much is that. How much is a Series S? $250?
Yes, I believe it's $250.
Like, games are £70 now. You only need to want to buy 4 games full price before it's cheaper to get a Series S. And get them all through Game Pass. And like, so the more
$250, yeah.
And like, again, I don't think that's going to be as much of a talking point, because I think a lot of these games will just end up being completely exclusive. But that is something that people are going to end up thinking about. And I was talking to some friends of mine the other day in the group of people I play kind of Warzone and Call of Duty with, because obviously they're very interested in what's going to happen with all of this. And I was saying to them, like, you don't need an Xbox to play some of these games, and that's going to become more and more the case in the future. Like, right now, you need an Xbox or a PC, but like, you might be able to play like a Call of Duty game in your browser via xCloud at some point in the future. You kind of can already, in a weird way, in a weird sort of like beta-y, testy way, but like, yeah, I wouldn't worry too much. Like, you're going to have options.
There's a strange, it does feel like, we've often said that, Xbox are winning the war, even if they don't win the battles, because it feels like they're playing the long game, they're playing the bigger game. And we've been saying for a couple of years now, it feels like PlayStation nail something, or they do a really good, PlayStation, what do they call them? PlayStation Showcase or whatever.
State of play.
State of play, thank you. And they'll say, you'll have an amazing state of play, and you'll say, oh, look at these amazing games that are coming out. And then Xbox don't seem to do the same, or don't seem to go as big, but then you constantly hear little things about Xbox throughout the entire year where you're like, damn, they seem to be like winning the war, because they seem to make a lot more smart, small decisions and big decisions as well. And this does feel like they've managed to position themselves. It's like chess, right? Microsoft have managed to get to a position whereby Game Pass is becoming ubiquitous. You've got like 25 million people who have Game Pass at the moment, which is a big thing. You then get them snatching up more and more studios, and putting them under their umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe positioning PlayStation further and further on the outside, which gets more and more people buying Game Pass. And you're going to get to the point where the question isn't like, are you Xbox, are you PlayStation, or are you PC? Xbox and PC become synonymous because that's what Game Pass is on. So then you effectively have it's PlayStation versus PC and Xbox, which becomes a bit of a non-argument, right? And then you get to the weird position, which we were saying before the pod, is in my mind, you get Sony have to sort of realize that they're becoming more and more of a Nintendo, and that they have to really sort of hone in and focus in on what they do well, and almost voluntarily shrink a bit and just focus on super amazing first party titles, VR, like, the VR2 is coming out hopefully the end of this year, amazing controllers, new tech, like peripherals that you can't get, third party stuff like on PC or with Xbox or anything like that. But it kind of does mean that they're gradually shrinking more and more and more and become more of a niche product. Potentially.
It's been interesting to watch the kind of the market react to this news. I think Sony
contraction
stock,
on Sony,
dropped 13%, represented about $20 billion.
I'm so glad I sold my Sony stock last year. I only had about 100 quid's worth, but
well, it would have been worth 13% less. So woohoo! There you go. Congratulations. It's going to be interesting because you're right. I think you're looking at it the right way, and I agree with you in terms of like it's not about knee-jerk reactions from Sony, but maybe it is about long-term positioning and how you kind of frame the argument around the console you're trying to sell and the ecosystem you're trying to build out. I think there's going to be, for as much as this has generated a lot of discussion, and for as much as Sony stock has taken a hit, as we've just said, and Sony have made comments that seem like, hey, Call of Duty they're still coming to PlayStation. I still think that there are going to be a lot of people, especially in the upper echelons of Sony and the people who call the shots over there, who aren't going to be too fazed by something like this. They're going to sit there and say, hey, do you know what? Like, what we do well and our plan for the future isn't changed that much, even if we lose a couple of extra third-party titles each year along the way. And so far, it's been about, creating a high-quality console experience, a desirable console experience, creating the most popular ecosystem, even though it's not necessarily supported by the best services, and extremely high-quality first-party titles that are capable of selling, 5, 10, 15, 20 million units at full price, which is an extremely powerful thing. It was interesting talking to a group of friends this week about all of this. The PlayStation brand is still extremely strong. The Xbox brand still, for as much hard work as they've done and for as much as people like you and I acknowledge how much they've come on, still doesn't hold the same weight as the PlayStation brand amongst a lot of gamers. And so I don't think they'll be too worried. But yeah, in the long term, especially if Microsoft continue to pull off crazy moves like this and continue to take third-party titles, and in some cases massive third-party titles like Call of Duty, off the plates of PlayStation gamers, then they might have to look at themselves a little bit harder and say, actually, yeah, we will have to become almost a bit more of a boutique console and be like, oh, well, it's still the only going to play God of War Ragnarok, and God of War Ragnarok is going to have a 96 on Metacritic, and it's going to be one of, if not the best game of the year, and it's going to get talked about in the best game of the generation debates, and like, you want to play it? We don't have fucking Game Pass. You can't play this shit on PC for another 2 years. You want it? Buy a fucking PlayStation. And so far, the response is that in lots of people, to the tune of tens of millions, will go, okay, yeah, I'll buy a PlayStation when they hear that. You and I amongst them. Chris amongst them now as well, even. So they're not going to be worried. But it's going to be interesting to see how this shit changes over the course of a decade, because these, you made the reference there to battles and wars, right? And that's the classic argument. And these things unfold very slowly, and yet when you take stock of the situation, you realize just how much they've changed. Can I throw out a weird anecdote?
Yeah, go for it.
I promise I'll keep it snappy because I know I've been talking for a long time. But I'm sad enough that I like to go back and watch old E3 press conferences. Right. And I've been doing that in the last couple of weeks, and I was doing it even before the acquisition. It was just something I was doing for fun. And it's fascinating going back to watch Microsoft's press conferences at E3, especially around 2015, where Don Matrick and the whole idea of having the Xbox One as the center of the living room and an entertainment device had been completely flushed. They knew the focus had to be on games, and they were working really hard to build up their portfolio of first-party titles, but also exclusive third-party titles, and they were struggling. And 2015 is the year where clearly some creative individual at Microsoft decided that the way they were going to present their big titles, their big games for their platform that year, because all the focus had to be on games, was they were going to use big heads, like they were going to use the heads, the literal faces, and the profiles of major characters from within the Xbox ecosystem, and they were going to kind of like swivel round, and the background would change to represent the game they're from. And they did it. And the heads they chose were Marcus Phoenix, not because of Gears of War 4, but because they were in the process of remastering the first Gears of War.
Oh, right, okay.
They chose one of the characters, but not Master Chief, from Halo 5, Halo 5 Guardians. I think it was called Spartan Locke. They chose Lara Croft because they had just paid way too much for timed exclusivity for Rise of the Tomb Raider in a deal that most people shrugged their shoulders at. It was a face that I didn't recognize at all, but it turned out to be one of the then playable characters from the soon-to-be-cancelled free-to-play Fable game called Fable Legends, and then Master Chief, another character from Halo 5 Guardians. So there was Phil standing on stage, this was 7 years ago, 6.5 years ago, saying like, we promise we're making games for the Xbox. And he had 2 Halo 5 characters, timed exclusivity from Lara Croft, and a character from a Fable game that was about to get cancelled. And like, not only has their situation improved leaps and bounds in that 6.5 years, but it's also very interesting to see what happened in between the games when you watched the press conference in 2015, because you could tell they didn't want to put too much emphasis on stuff because they knew that people wanted to see games, but they needed to do stuff. And that was the year where, they started much more openly talking about PC. In previous years, as weird as it is to think back, there would be a time where if a game was coming to Xbox and PC, you wouldn't mention the PC part. Because PC was synonymous with Steam, that's another platform, it's money in someone else's pocket, it doesn't matter, you talk about the Xbox and that's it. Now, they're starting to talk about PC. We weren't quite at the kind of like the point where you could buy the game once and own it on both platforms, but that was as we now know, in development. We talked about EA Access. I can't remember who it was, but someone from EA comes out and is like, EA Access is coming onto Xbox. That was them introducing third-party subscription services onto their platform for the first time, and PlayStation wouldn't welcome EA Access onto their platform for a number of years further to that. They show off the Xbox Elite controller for the first time, which again, like, I'm not a great example of what I'm talking about, but like, and then they also introduced backwards compatibility, and it's like, okay,
right,
they had those shit games. But this was also Microsoft at a very interesting point of realizing, like you said, there are more battles to be won than just games. And I know people love to come to E3 and talk about games and see games, but clearly we can start to build an infrastructure around the Xbox ecosystem that in the long run will start to pay dividends when people say, what does this have to offer for me beyond the games itself? And now they are not just delivering on that, because we talked about their services and their products and their hardware and to no end. They're also delivering on the game side of things, where they're slowly but surely building up a stable of first-party titles through either, long-term first-party studios that they've owned to these newly acquired ones that not just like outweighs Sony in terms of the scope of them, the volume, but also the scale, and eventually maybe even the quality. And when we get to that point, that's how much things have changed in the last 6.5 years. Another 6-7 years, another generation's time. Who knows which direction the pendulum can swing? What I'm trying to say is, Jonesy, Nintendo are going to win the next generation.
Maybe Nintendo are going to come out with like the most technologically advanced console you've ever seen. It's going to blow everything else out of the water.
Yeah.
But do you know what I think the play for Sony is? Because I'm overstating it when I say that I think that they're going to like shrink and they're going to have to focus. I'm purposely overstating because I'm saying that's the direction I think they could end up going in. Right? If they don't sort of maybe make some moves in order to try and combat the growth of Microsoft, because they're obviously so much smaller than Microsoft anyway as a company, but they're not when it comes to the share, the console share. But one thing I do think Sony could do, or PlayStation could do, that would make a big difference, and well, not a big difference, but would massively shore up their first party offerings, which I could see happening, is Sony go out and rather than do a Microsoft, which is kind of buy everything, right? They're buying everything up with the hope that they own so much of everything that people are like, well, they own the studio that I like to play most. So they're buying all the players by kind of buying everything around it and then de facto sucking in most of the players. Whereas I think what PlayStation and what Sony do is they have such good first party games, and this is what they've really cultivated, that they're games that you have to play. You totally hate to miss out on. So what I think Sony might do is they might turn around and say, do you know what? We need to add another super high-end IP or studio to our roster of first-party titles in order to double down. So rather than do the Microsoft thing of buying loads of companies, loads of publishers, loads sort of studios, whatever, they go and they buy insanely high-end. That's why I think it would not be that surprising if they went and they tried to buy Rockstar from underneath.
Oh, God.
Take-Two.
From Take-Two. I mean, imagine, like, again, Chris and I talking last week about crazy shit. Like, that would be crazy.
I could just imagine Red Dead Redemption, Grand Theft Auto are added to the roster of PlayStation only first party. This is not coming to Xbox. This is not coming to PC. If you want to play those games, you need to have a PlayStation. I just feel like that would... When you put those games, like you just said, the heads that Microsoft had, like, oh, who would you put up? They still have that problem today. Like, they still have the problem of first-party games. Yeah. What big bobbleheads would Microsoft put up? Absolutely. In years to come from now, like 3 years down the line, 4 years down the line, you could say, oh, look at all the companies they own. Look at Bethesda, look at Blizzard, look at Activision. They can now start to fill out those bobbleheads with some more impressive characters. But being the size they are, if Sony went and bought Rockstar, imagine they could have Red Dead Redemption head, Grand Theft Auto head, then they've got Kratos, then they've got Ratchet and Clank, then they've got Spider-Man, then they've got I think Ghost of Tsushima, then they've got like all Horizon. They've got they are beating Microsoft at the first party game side of it, owning like a fraction of the studios.
It's true. And I suppose
they should do it. If you're watching right now, PlayStation, Sony, someone high up, go and buy Rockstar.
It's a very important asterisk to add to all of this, which is that for as much as Xbox had a strong 2021, thanks to I think like games like Forza Horizon 5 and Halo Infinite and Psychonauts 2 and to a lesser extent titles like Age of Empires and stuff like coming on strong, there is still an element of like, yeah, you also need to start taking all the things you're buying and turning them into legitimately critically acclaimed games in the same way that all the Sony franchises you just mentioned have. And like, yeah, like Halo was Halo and Forza was Forza. I give them props for things like Psychonauts 2, but you need to Psychonauts 2ify everything else you're buying as well, and also hope that some of them go on to be, God of War and Spider-Man style successes too.
One of the problems is,
we'll see.
And one of the problems with like covering all your bases, like Microsoft are trying to buy up everyone and get, have not everyone, but buy up a lot of these big companies and pump out a lot of these high-end games. Do you think they also take the hit? So if you do get shit games put out by these companies, Microsoft also potentially, are they going to be the ones to take the rap for it? So even though you could say, oh, do you know what? It wasn't us, it was Bethesda. What if a Starfield fails? What if it comes out and is like mediocre and people say, I can't believe we waited so long for this damn game, it's shite.
I think they'll be under scrutiny because, especially in the case of something like Starfield, because that was a recent acquisition, and because like the Bethesda acquisition and the adding of the Bethesda studios and franchises into the Xbox family has been so publicized that it will reflect on Microsoft. But then again, you look at Sony, and every time they have had a misfire, they have done a very good job of like sweeping it under the rug or making the developers look like the stupid ones. And when you look at it's not a great example because I know there's a lot of support out there for Sony Bend, and there were a lot of people who love Days Gone, but like Sony tried really hard to make it clear that like, oh yeah, the developers of Days Gone fucked up. Like, not nothing. Hey, if Naughty Dog and Sony Santa Monica and Guerrilla can do their jobs, then Ben could have as well. They just didn't because they're fuck ups and we're fine. Yeah. They did it as well. Like to a lesser extent, I still remember like it was one of the talking points. Do you remember with No Man's Sky? When No Man's Sky completely was in big trouble out of the gate, and Sony, who had been like so there for them that whole time, to the point where they almost felt like they were treating them as first party. And the second No Man's Sky came out and was what it was, Sony were like, those guys are fucking crazy. That game was way too ambitious. I don't know what they were thinking. It's like, motherfucker, you put them like on your stage for like 5 years in a row and gave them massive time slots to do massive demos. You were eating up every bit of publicity that game bought you. And the second it flopped, you distanced yourself.
Although I will say, time has proven that Hello Games were a good company to stand behind because they still support that game to this day and still pump out new stuff for it, and they are
the ultimate middle finger is No Man's Sky 2, Microsoft platform exclusive.
yeah. Well, this makes it more interesting as well. Actually, if you talk about if you think about Kojima was obviously supposedly in talks with Microsoft at some point in the not too distant past, and then you look at like Death Stranding and stuff. If Microsoft go and buy Kojima Productions, that would be quite a bloody thing, wouldn't it, as well?
That would also be very cool.
Maybe not the best time for them to do it at the moment. Maybe Kojima needs to put out another game and get some love back on his side before they do that. But
maybe
it would be a hell of a story.
Yeah, and like, there's another question then, because I was just reminded you talking about Kojima getting some love back, and I was reminded of previous Kojima franchises, and then Konami as a name still in the mix, and no one being quite sure what they're planning on doing in the gaming sphere. When they're not making pachinko machines. And I guess I'll spin that out into a question. Like, beyond, obviously, you've said that, part of your plan would be to go at Take-Two and try and somehow buy Rockstar and the Rockstar franchises.
Money, mate, that's how, not somehow. Money.
If I said you could also do one more thing, like one more major publisher or studio or franchise acquisition, like we've talked a little bit here and there about, Ubisoft, and we just mentioned Konami and stuff, like what would you target? Where do you think the money is? Where do you think the goodwill is? Which do you value more?
We've already thrown their name about.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and I know at the moment they're a bit, hit and miss, and they're a little bit, maybe lukewarm is a good way to put it. I think if Sony bought Ubisoft,
right,
which would be massively affordable when you're considering that it's a 10th of the size of the acquisition that Microsoft have just done. for sheer like name power, if you want to say like Rockstar would be the best thing you could buy, because you're gonna, as soon as you got Grand Theft Auto, as soon as you got Red Dead, like I think you're laughing. Even like to a lesser extent like Bully and things like that. If you really wanted to put out another Bully game, you could do that. But if you've got Assassin's Creed, if you've got Far Cry, if you've got entire Tom Clancy stable, if you've got The Division, if you've got all of these names that have, even if they're not like, you know, Splinter Cell, things like that, even if they're not in the best place they've ever been at the moment, they are still some epic names in gaming.
Yeah.
And when you sort of take, because if you said like Microsoft have bought Ubisoft, I would think Ubisoft are going to just keep doing what Ubisoft do. Microsoft are going to have a little bit more sway, maybe going to say to them, come on guys, put a little bit more time into the games, like maybe spend a little bit longer to sort of put a bit more polish on them. I would love to see what Sony did if they had more of an influence over Ubisoft. You would see like an Assassin's Creed game that you haven't seen since like Assassin's Creed 2. Like,
yeah, very
I
possibly.
think that's an exciting prospect. So for me, it would probably be that. It would probably be Ubisoft.
Yeah. You know, it's really interesting because, like, you make a fascinating example there when you talk about Ubisoft's catalog and the franchises that you'd welcome into your own portfolio should you acquire them for a small fee relative to the amount that Microsoft paid for Activision Blizzard.
Small fee, yeah.
And then, like, you think about Activision Blizzard being worth $69 billion. There is a little bit, and I'm not saying this in a bad way, I'm not saying trying to draw into question the amount that Microsoft paid, but, like, there's a bit of a thing where you're like, people go, the publishers behind Call of Duty, Overwatch, Diablo, and Candy Crush, and you're like, oh yeah, like, cool, what else do they get? And then you read it, it's like Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, Tony Hawk, and you start to realize, like, Activision under Bobby Kotick, ironically, did such a good job of running those franchises into the ground and eventually killing them, that there is a little bit of that Activision back catalogue effect that you look at and you're like, hang on a second, this is what they paid $70 billion for?
What did they buy? And then you realise that basically it's Call of Duty. That's
yeah,
the thing,
exactly. And I think that's where it gets interesting. Like, one of the things that we talked about before is the potential for, like, can you get Konami one way or another to part ways with some of their video game IPs? Like, not, if not outright, you know, you let them still make pachinko machines out of them, but at least the rights to make video games out of them. In which case, can you get like some cut price deal and all of a sudden, you know, Metal Gear, Castlevania, Contra, and Silent Hill, you have like, just taking those four there, like four franchises that gamers are hungry for more of, in the case of games like, in the case of like Metal Gear and Silent Hill, especially, that you could do theoretically whatever you want with, and like, for, I don't even know how much that would cost, but not very much. And then you look at like I went fishing for some other Activision titles that were maybe lesser known, and it's like Gun, Prototype.
Oh, Gun was great. Prototype was good as well.
Singularity, True Crime,
Right.
Metal Arms, DJ Hero, Zork, Pitfall.
Old school.
And it's like those are cool names to say again, but like a new True Crime. I say a new True Crime doesn't sell as well as a new Silent Hill. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe a new True Crime sells amazingly, and a new Prototype probably would be pretty fucking sick. But
with the graphics of these days, Prototype would be wicked.
Go on then. And not to divert the conversation, but just a little quick side note. Which, if you have infinite budget, Microsoft hires you to take a dormant Activision IP and will include like Tony Hawk and Crash and Spyro in this, even though they've popped up in the last handful of years. So anything that's not Call of Duty, you get unlimited budget to bring it back for the next generation. Because I've got to say, like, the prospect of making a next-gen Prototype 3 gets me rock hard. That and Guitar Hero.
Guitar Hero. I used to love Guitar Hero, and it
Microsoft's own it now.
It pains me when you can't go and just play a Guitar Hero game. Like that, I think the model of those games was what killed it. But they are so fun. Like, literally used to sit in a room with 4 other people just playing Guitar Hero like for hours on end, and it was so much fun. Like, I miss those days. If they could bring that back, that'd be great. I wouldn't want to spend all my money doing that.
Yeah,
but I don't even know. Like, this is the thing. There aren't that many games that I'm like, oh, do you know what? They really need to bring.
You wouldn't make a Gun 2 and try and make your like a rival to Red Dead Redemption?
I see. I love the gun games, but I've got no desire to go and. I don't think I'd try and do that. I don't think it would be something that I feel needs to happen. Yeah, if you want to play a good, modern Western, play Red Dead Redemption 2. You're fine. I tell you, I suddenly though, as you were talking about Kojima and Konami, I did have a bit of a pro tip, pro level move for Sony, and this is something I have not considered before. Now, Sony buy Kojima Productions. I know they helped set it up, like there was a lot of Sony money in there, but they actually buy it, right? Then they go and buy, like you said, the IP for Metal Gear Solid.
Yep.
Then they give Metal Gear Solid to Kojima Productions.
I mean,
and get Kojima to make a new Metal Gear Solid game.
Stuff like this seems like again, when any one company is willing to spend $69 billion on another, like all of this stuff all becomes frustratingly plausible. I know Konami
it does.
Konami
just numbers on paper.
Exactly. Like I'm pretty sure at this point Konami do have their own plans for stuff. Like there was that rumored Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater remake,
right?
From that we talked about at some point last year, and obviously Silent Hill rumors are always a dime a dozen. And I do genuinely believe that Silent Hill is one of those no smoke without fire situations. But like, you could do something cool there. You could do something cool.
Well,
I
think this is the problem, that it's too wide. Like you said, it's too wide open. There's too much money on the table. And when you're just writing silly numbers down, I mean, people just, they're just going to say, it just becomes too businessy. You lose any loyalty. You knew any sort of like IP, like ownership. It just becomes ridiculous when you're talking so much money. I think it does become anything can happen. Like Nintendo could buy Sega and like start putting Sonic games out on the Switch. It just becomes like, what is the world we're living in? Cats and dogs living together, total anarchy.
Yeah, and like, who knows? We could be back here in 6 months' time when antitrust regulators have shot down Microsoft's attempt to buy Activision Blizzard. The whole deal is scrapped. Everything's gone back to normal. And then we're just, all of this conversation becomes redundant anyway.
Yeah. I think the only thing that could stop it now is if in a month or so, Microsoft also announced that they're buying EA. Like, it would just be, it would be the end. And FIFA is no longer going to be on the PlayStation.
That is when I think someone would have to step in and be like, I don't know what you're cooking up, Phil, but it smells like a monopoly to me.
Yeah, literally, it's just a monopoly. That's all they're trying to do. They're actually trying to build a monopoly, and they just grease a few palms in, governments and things, and then get away with it.
Do governments? This might be a stupid question. Obviously, there's reasons why you try and avoid a monopoly. But if what seems like it is a duopoly a word when there's two companies, and like if the video game industry was heading towards a duopoly, and like we joked before we started recording about like a video game Cold War, like an arms race where Sony and Microsoft were just taking it in turns, acquiring the biggest publishers and the biggest IPs in the world, until basically every major third-party franchise was then owned by either Sony or Microsoft and made exclusive to their platforms. Is that something that like antitrust regulators and so on and so forth like try to avoid? Is that?
I think
that's also like negative for the consumer in the long run. I don't know.
Well, I think the biggest problem when you get like a duopoly is not like a Cold War between the companies. It's like price fixing. So when you've only got a few big players in the market, you effectively you can have a situation, obviously, where they get together behind the scenes and they agree that they're going to make certain moves to screw the customer over. And then, like for example, if they both said we're going to put our games up to 120 quid a pop, but they both do it, you've got no choice.
Right.
Like you've got, and they can just freeze out any small player tries to get into the market. So yeah, I think that's more of the problem when you've only got a couple of big boys sitting right at the top. So yeah, but no, I've got no idea. I don't know enough about it, like to say what would be the good and the bad. But
I've already found Jason Schreier 5 hours ago quote tweeting a guy called Jerry Nadler, who represents parts of Manhattan and Brooklyn, proud to serve as the chair of the House Judiciary. So he is right. a member of Congress, who said Activision Blizzard, already a gaming giant, has a pattern of bullying workers to evade accountability for rampant sexual misconduct. I expect this deal to be closely scrutinized to ensure that it won't harm American workers or competition. So we do already have, on social media at least, members of Congress calling for the scrutinization of this deal. Whether or not that means anything, obviously it should be scrutinized. That's what these rules and regulations and regulatory groups are there for. But yeah, we'll see.
I must admit, I'm not sure how I don't know how they decide the market that they're looking at, right? Because obviously Microsoft, an American company, have bought Activision Blizzard, an American company, but then Sony are obviously not an American company. So then I'm not sure how that comes into it, because then does that mean they actually say, well, we're not really bothered about other countries, you've just become...
I think it becomes like a global
American
thing,
monopoly.
right? Because like even I think in the Bethesda thing, there were EU regulators that had to sign off on it.
Oh, I see. Right. Maybe it's if any country that your business spans, maybe.
Like maybe, yeah.
They've all got studios and buildings and offices all over the world, haven't they?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure this story will keep on giving for the next week or so, and we'll find out some more juicy details, more interesting facts that come out. We'll probably find out that Bobby Kotick has already moved to an island somewhere and is living it up and topping up his tan with his $300 or $250 trillion payout he's getting.
All of a sudden, he's become really keen on remote working, and he just wants to do everything via Zoom now. We can't figure out why, but it might be something to do with the beach that's now in the background of his webcam.
Yeah, the only person who's got a beach in the background of the webcam where it's not one of those like crappy overlays. It's not a green screen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Well, all that remains to say is thank you, Jamie, so much for joining me.
Thank you
for this episode of the Super Show podcast, episode number 106. Don't you know? How the hell have we done that many? If you've been with us from the beginning, if you've only just started following us recently, or if this is indeed your first one, then we are very glad to have you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. You can reach out to us. You can have a chat to us on YouTube or Twitter at SuperShowPod. We are on podcasting platforms if you happen to be watching this on YouTube. And if you're listening to this on a podcasting platform, you can also watch us do it in video on YouTube. PaisleyRadio.com, Mondays, Thursdays, 10 p.m. And with that having been said, Jamie, we just need a tasty code word.
Oh, shit.
So people who've made it this far know.
Do you know what? It's been so long since I've had to think of a code word that you've just made me realise I'm pretty sure we didn't do one last week.
Oh,
I think I hosted last week, and now I'm 99% sure that I completely forgot to ask for one, which is not good.
Shocking. The week before you had the cool one, which was the time, how long you guys would end up speaking about Metroid Dread.
Yeah. And there will be an element of that again next week when Chris inevitably gets to share his 2 cents on this entire deal.
For sure.
We talk about it. Although, at the rate that new headlines are and new quotes and factoids are coming out, there probably will be more meat on the bone by the time we get to next week anyway. So,
should we ask a question rather than have a code word? Should we ask a question? And the question could be: if you had $1 billion of Microsoft's money to ludicrously sink into one of the older dead Activision Blizzard IPs, what one would you pump that? $1 billion is a little bit extreme, but let's say $1 billion. What would you pump it into to bring it back to life?
Do you know what I think Chris would bring back?
Pitfall.
No, I think Chris would bring back DJ Hero.
I would have said you would bring that DJ Hero. I remember you're a bit of a fan of DJ Hero.
I played the first DJ Hero. I had the Renegade edition,
right,
which came with some stupid carrying case that had separate legs on it, so you could play it standing and not have to balance a whole thingy on your lap. I was more of a Guitar Hero and Rock Band guy, though, if I'm being honest. I don't know.
Yeah, me too. I was. I don't really know what DJs do. Don't they just put music on? I don't know if they have to do anything else.
If DJ Hero is anything to go by, you have to push buttons. You occasionally have to hold down those buttons and scratch the record, and that you would have a weird toggle thing where you would flick between different lanes, and one would be all of one track and one would be all of the other track, and if it was in the middle, it was playing them both at the same time. And you also had a button that could play sound effects. Right. Yeah.
Interesting.
Which I assume nowadays in 2022 times would just be that horn that goes you just play that every time.
That's the way to get from one track to another. Just cover it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then you switch.
I know we're ending this podcast and you've basically already wrapped up, but do Blizzard own any intellectual property that we've forgotten about? I'm looking at titles like Rock and Roll Racing and The Lost Vikings, but is there anything that we've really forgotten about that needs to come back?
Just let me have a really quick look.
The Death and Return of Superman. They probably don't. Well, they can't. They need a Superman license for that now. It does seem like a lot of it is just The Lost Vikings, which they haven't made one of those since 1997. and Rock and Roll Racing, which they made in 1993.
StarCraft and Warcraft.
Yeah,
They're
we
going,
mentioned them earlier. There are also things that are very hard to do with. Like, I don't know what the fuck you do with Hearthstone now. I presume it's still going and still active and still somewhat popular, but like, how do you refresh Hearthstone? It's like they're lucky that World of Warcraft stayed popular and stayed around long enough that they could go back and do Classic and stuff like that. Because, I mean, Heroes of the Storm died, didn't it? I know Steph loved it, but
yeah, I think he did, didn't he? Yeah, he was all about it. I don't even know, man. I can't even think of anything off the top of my head that Blizzard games like that.
I'm looking at it now, and like, really, basically, the simple answer is that there's not much. Like, it really does seem like it is basically either the Lost Vikings
Overwatch
or Rock and Roll Racing. So I don't even know what the Lost Vikings is, but I'm going to say bring back the Lost Vikings. There you go.
The Lost Vikings. Nice. I'm just going through a list now. I'm just trying to see if I can see anything different, but nothing is jumping out at me. They're like, oh yeah.
Yeah. I think it's because we've already found it. I think we've peaked with the Lost Vikings. I'm watching a long play of it right now on the SNES. And this, like, if ever there were a game that quote unquote needed a remake, as the YouTube comments love to point out, it's the Lost Vikings 2.
I take it back. They made Battle Chess.
Yeah, but then they turn that into like Dota is Battle Chess now.
Oh yeah, they did, didn't they? They did a weird thing where they put.
Well, that's not them, but like, yeah, like Battle Chess is a thing.
Battle Chess used to be great. I used to love a bit of Battle Chess back in the day.
Why don't you just get really into World of Warcraft, Jonesy? I think that should be your new pivot.
I couldn't do it.
I think you should.
I'm not.
You're probably going to get a free membership as a member of Xbox Game Pass, as a subscriber of Xbox Game Pass. That's all you need.
I think I've tried to play it one time, and no, couldn't do it. Anyway, we've finished this podcast once already. We should definitely finish it properly now. Thank you, everyone. Let us know what franchise of Activision's or Blizzard, if you really like one of those Blizzard ones, that you would bring back if you could pump $1 billion of Microsoft money into it. Let us know in the comments down below, and we will see you next week for some more Super Show goodness.
See ya.